present. The State Board of Education meeting of August 13, 2024 is called to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda and order of priority. Are there any items that board members would like to add or delete from the agenda? Mr. McMillan.
I didn't raise my hand.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm sorry. Okay,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, I wish to move to amend the agenda to add two special education resolutions to Roman numeral 11, make a section M for special education resolutions to be considered.
Ms. Snyder, would you like them considered together or separately?
Separately at this time, I'll read the first one into the record.
Which one are you moving?
The call to action to improve special education and the educational outcomes of Michigan's 207,000 students with disabilities.
We have a motion. We have a second from Mr. McMillan. Ms. Snyder, to you.
I'll read it into the record. Whereas federal law mandates and funds the free and appropriate education for all, including special education students. Whereas despite receiving the dollars to provide an education to these students, Michigan continues to be in discriminatory violation of the IDEA 2004 Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the regulatory provision thereof. Whereas the following failures and data support the next steps necessary to address this discrimination and to improve the educational outcomes of Michigan students. Michigan Department of Education changed the criteria to determine the existence of a specific learning disability on May 14, 2010, which has resulted in the reduction of the percentage of students being found eligible for special education services by 11%. Only 25% of students with an IEP are eligible under a specific learning disability, and down from 36% in 2010. The Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education, otherwise known as MARS, has more restrictive criteria for students to be evaluated for an autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as ASD. This has and continues to result in more students medically diagnosed with ASD not being found eligible under the MARS rules, and their educational needs go unmet. MDE and Michigan's intermediate school districts, or ISDs, have reduced the number of ASD programs over the past 10 years that should be providing individualized education to students that need these services. According to the CDC, 1 out of every 36 children was diagnosed with ASD in 2020. In 2018, that figure was 1 out of every 44, and in 2010, it was 1 out of every 68. ASD is on the rise, and despite the urgent need to research why education systems should not be reducing the criteria to evaluate for and identify ASD, or reducing the programming satisfying the mandate to provide these services to those in need. Michigan is a state like any other state in our nation in experiencing a rise in ASD. In 2021, at the heart of the timeline of the pandemic, the CDC reported that an estimated 40,000 Michigan children have ASD. During the pandemic, the Michigan Department of Education, or MDE, unlawfully defined compensatory education for special education students. The Federal Office for Civil Rights is now taking MDE to an administrative hearing. This kind of federal action has not been taken by the Federal Office for Civil Rights in 27 years with any state in our country. The Federal Office for Civil Rights shared the following response. Yes, these administrative enforcement proceedings are rare because most recipients voluntarily come into compliance after OCR notifies the recipient of a violation or compliance concern. MDE can voluntarily come into compliance with Section 504 at any point. The last administrative hearing where the department issued a final decision to terminate federal funds was in 1997. Whereas the right to a free and appropriate education for every student with a disability in Michigan affords each person the opportunity to meet their maximum potential, the State Board of Education believes in the full implementation and provision of this right. Therefore, be it resolved that in the absence of the MDE functioning as an appropriate regulatory body ensuring that federal laws are carried out on behalf of special education students, the State Board of Education urges the legislature to appropriate funds to order a financial audit, an actuarial study of the dollars and services rendered to special education students during the pandemic and in current practice to address and improve the outcomes of those most in need. The State Board of Education recommends this audit and study answer important questions below that will ensure the financial resources dedicated to these students and the current infrastructure is serving the intended purpose of our local educational agencies, providing an individualized education. What direct services do and did all 56 ISDs currently provide and during the pandemic? What evaluations do and did all 56 ISDs currently provide and during the pandemic? What special education staff and administrators do and did all 56 ISDs currently provide to our local school districts and during the pandemic? How many local school districts and charter schools do each of the 56 ISDs cover? How much PA 18 funding do each of the 56 ISDs receive? How has this changed over the past 20 years, grafted per school year? Explore the full extent of how all 56 ISDs have reduced the number of categorical special education programs: ASD, emotional impairment, hearing impairment, moderate cognitive impairment, severe cognitive impairment, and severe multiple impairment. And contrary to the need for increased capacities in programs such as ASD. Explore the full extent to which ISDs are not providing individualized education through R340-1758, R340-1741, R340-1738, and R340-1748 MARS programs, and have or are transitioning to a R340-1832E service program, referred to as 1832E Level 3 and 4 programs, where students with various disorders and impairments are inappropriately placed in the same program, with a teacher endorsed in any special education area, even though these varied areas of special education eligibility interfere with the educational needs and attainments of one another, thereby negatively impacting student outcomes. That's the first resolution.
We have a motion, we have a second, it's been read into the record. Is there any other discussion prior to a vote, not on the merits of the resolution, but on placing the resolution on the agenda for later consideration? Any other discussion? Mr. McMillan.
I would just say that I think it's important to at least place this and have and debate. I think that it is historic in a very unfortunate sense that MDE, Michigan Department of Education, has, is going through this administrative hearing. Again, it hasn't ever happened in 27 years. I know it's been kept from us on the state board by the state superintendent for a very long time, kept from the media. Maybe that's why the media hasn't been talking about it as well. But there clearly is a concern. Other states have had issues similar, but they actually acted on it and made sure that it didn't go to administrative hearing, that they actually voluntarily came into compliance. But for some reason, our state refuses to look at compensatory education for special ed students and how that was swept under the rug during COVID and post-COVID. And many of these kids, unfortunately, have aged out of the system.
This is about
well, that's why I think it's important.
Well,
I think this is why I'm expressing why I think it's important to vote yes to put it on the agenda. If to say no is to continue to turn a blind eye towards what MD is doing and saying that we're fine, that they've been keeping us in the dark, because we are the employer of our employee, State Superintendent Rice, who has kept this from us, and I think it's an important matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McMillan. Any other board members care to share before we vote on the placement or not of this on the agenda? Dr. Pugh.
I have to say something because, first of all, it is our jobs. We are elected to get this information, and I do look forward to hearing more. Dr. Rice and you and I have talked about this, but it's unfortunate that we show up here every month and we have items that are being politicized. This is a very important group of children that we have to be concerned about. And it is our job to get this information, not to move it over to some group that will be formed to do our jobs. And I just am disheartened to hear two of our board members bringing up these issues. It was a few years ago that we had 7 school children who were fighting for a right to literacy. And the 2 board members, our 2 Republican board members, fought hard against those children and their right to literacy when they were crying out for books for teachers in the school buildings, books in their school building, that they would have heat, that they would have air. You fought hard against that. And here we are, again, in this space, and you are politicizing our children. I will vote no.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Other board members? Any other board members before we vote? Ms. Snyder?
I would just rebut that. That information is not accurate, and the second resolution that I'll read after you vote no on this one will be an urgent request for that information, so you'll have the opportunity to show the public whether or not you want it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Snyder. Seeing no other people who are interested in discussing this at this time, this is a roll call vote on placement on the agenda or not.
Bullock?
No.
Lipton?
No.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
No.
Pugh?
No.
Robinson?
No.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
No.
Motion fails.
Any other resolutions for consideration for the board agenda? Ms. Snyder, to you.
Yes, the second resolution is an urgent request for a presentation on Michigan's 3 current Office of Civil Rights complaints. Whereas federal law mandates and funds the free and appropriate education for all, including special education students, thank you. Whereas despite receiving the dollars to provide an education to these students, Michigan continues to be in discriminatory violation of the IDEA 2004, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the regulatory provision thereof. Whereas one complaint directly relates to compensatory education to the Michigan Department of Education, or MDE, and our schools were compensated for in order to provide for the learning loss and learning that did not allow for the progress of special education students. I will forgo the first bullet point since it was in the last resolution, but just a reminder, the last time we had a termination of federal funds was in 1997 for this. The latest response to this OCR complaint was on August 9th, this past weekend. And here's what the U.S. Department of Education has to say to the MDE. MDE's arguments reflect fundamental misunderstandings about the scope of Section 504, which raise further compliance concerns. MDE appears to believe that IDEA-eligible students with disabilities are not also protected by Section 504. OCR is concerned that this misconception, unless corrected, reflects a likelihood that MDE's violation will recur, and MDE will not meet its Section 504 obligations in the future for Michigan students protected under both the IDEA and Section 504 Supersection 3. OCR's notice contains detailed allegations stemming from OCR's investigation based on MDE's documents and admissions of their own that MDE violated these fundamental tenets of Section 504. By clarifying the misconceptions about Section 504 that form the basis for MDE's refusal to resolve this matter, OCR hopes negotiations can resume and expedite the ultimate resolution of this case. Be it therefore resolved that the State Board of Education calls on MDE to present with the information on all 3 OCR complaints at the September 2024 State Board of Education meeting, and urges the MDE to come into compliance with OCR requirements to provide a free and appropriate education to special education students in Michigan.
We have a motion from Ms. Snyder, a second from Mr. McMillan. It's been read into the record. Any other discussion? Any other discussion, board members, on the placement of this item on the agenda, not the merits of, the placement of the item on the agenda? Mr. McMillan.
Let me just reiterate what I said before, that I think it's important that this board get the information that's needed, that this kind of presentation is long overdue, and that if we are to fulfill our fiduciary duty in something so large as this matter, so significant, and so unheard of, in very historic, unfortunately, that MD is been found in violation or is going through the process in administrative hearings, something that hasn't been done in 27 years by any state, and that it's been kept from us, from this board table. I would hope that we would at least want a presentation at the very least. It seems like something very reasonable that we and the public should understand as much as possible. And I mean, I would also hope that we bring in others who can speak to it as well, maybe not, maybe give an alternative view, but at the very least hear one side, what the state is doing and why they are fighting this and refusing to come into compliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McMillan. Any other comments on the motion to place this resolution on the agenda? Any other board members? You want another bite of the apple?
I do.
Okay.
I would like to appeal to my fellow board members that this is just a request for presentation and information. It's not to politicize a group of students or any particular thing. Ultimately, if you lead with compassion, you say what has happened, and we do the next right thing. We can't do the next right thing in this situation if we aren't even able to say that we want to hear the information.
Thank you very much, Ms. Snyder. Seeing no other, Dr. Pugh.
I will be voting this item down, being placed on the agenda. That does not mean that I don't care. That does not mean that I have not had discussions on what has been in this complaint. But I have had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Rice. I do think that we will continue to hear updates on what is going on with this complaint in this case, and therefore I will be voting this agenda item down.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Anyone else for the good of the group? Hearing none, roll call vote on placement on the agenda.
Bullock?
No.
Lipton?
No.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
No.
Pugh?
No.
Robinson?
No.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
No.
Motion passed.
Any other board members care to offer any other motions for the agenda? Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move to place on the agenda the resolution I submitted, and its title is Reform Government Immunity when Serious Injury or Death Occurs at Michigan Schools.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. McMillan, a second from Ms. Snyder. Ms. McMillan.
If I may read it into the record for consideration that it be added to the agenda. Thank you. Whereas due to governmental immunity, the high threshold of gross negligence must be proved for someone whose son or daughter died in a school shooting to successfully sue a Michigan school district. Whereas in all private and public sectors responsible for providing safety, individuals are accountable for the negligence thereof. School employees are no different. Without appropriate consequences for negligence, schools may be unmotivated to make the necessary changes to keep kids safe, and our judicial branch does not have the legal foundation to hold school employees accountable to their actions or inaction. School officials in Oxford were not only not held accountable for their negligence that resulted in the death of 4 students, they were transferred to other districts in Michigan without consequence and remain employed. Whereas in July 2024, the Michigan legislature, led by Democrat legislators, voted to remove governmental immunity from civil cases involving public schools and colleges that fail to address sexual violence. Therefore, be it resolved that the State Board of Education urges the Michigan legislature to pass legislation to address the following when someone has been seriously injured or killed at a public school or school function. 1, amend current law on governmental immunity to be provided only if proper implementation of the adopted and available to parents Emergency Operations Plan, EOP, is carried out, and only when individuals involved in carrying out the EOP are not found negligent of proper implementation of the EOP. And 2, amend current law to define gross negligence as failing to implement a properly created, updated, and approved EOP as defined by state EOP laws. In addition, failure to create or properly update a reasonable EOP that is in compliance with state EOP laws would also be understood as exhibiting gross negligence by a school or school district. And if I could speak to it briefly. As to why I think it should be added, we have come before, Board Member Snyder and I have come before this body in the past and put something similar. This was basically one of several items in resolutions. I have chose, because I think this is extremely important, that we just extract that and just focus strictly on governmental immunity. I am encouraged by at least the Democrats in the House, voting last month to remove governmental immunity in some cases, particularly the Nassar situation. That certainly was appropriate for them to do that, to vote for that. I don't know if it's just a symbolic vote and it's not going anywhere in the Senate or not going to eventually see the governor's desk, but at least they're willing to move in that. And I think the situation we're talking about that happened in Oxford and trying to prevent that anywhere else in any other schools in the state of Michigan, I think is equally or even more important. And so I certainly think that, addressing and having the legislature and urging them to take up reforming governmental immunity to really get at the incentives and making sure that, they will follow the laws with the EOP. It was disclosed that I don't think the state has been looking at EOP, the EOPs of local districts, that there's just really been a dropping of the ball. Nobody can understand what Oxford's EOP looked like. And so I think that certainly there needs to be accountability put into the system. And I think that at least calling on the legislature to address it is appropriate. And I think that that's why it should be at least on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Millen. Anyone else? Ms. Snyder.
I would just say that I would add it to the agenda simply because we talked about this at our retreat this last spring. Education is an industry like no other that enjoys government immunity. And it does need to be reformed. And so the statement coming from a board like this, it makes sense. But at the heart of it is not disagreement. It's just simply a plead to education to do something about something. Don't do nothing about something. And when the heart of it is clear and we can add something like this to the agenda and debate it well, and pass something in a unified fashion, then we can send that message. And if we don't add it to the agenda and we can't debate it well and we can't send that message, the message does not get sent and students remain unsafe.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Anyone else care to share? Dr. Pugh.
Last month, or last meeting, June, we passed a resolution, and part of that resolution was calling for a body to be formed, asking the legislature to form a body. And that is something that the parents of Oxford asked us as a board for during the special meeting as well. And as I mentioned in June, I will continue to push for that body to be formed, because from that body, we can hear from the parents of the victims and hear more of what it is that they want. I think that they are the experts here at this time, and I think that that's where we should be putting our attention and our efforts for a group of parents who children's lives were lost, and hearing from them and what it is that they want, and them impressing upon the legislature and others to work together to come up with the solutions versus us here at the table. And that is what we agreed on as a bipartisan body.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Any other discussion? Ms. Snyder.
I will rebut that, because when they came to our table at the board retreat, they were very, very clear. The number one thing that matters most to them is limiting government immunity when the actions of a school employee has injured a student or killed a student. They said it, you could roll the tape back on the retreat, they said it multiple times. They're begging and pleading with their government to take action. So we've heard from them. We need to take action.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, a roll call vote on the placement of this item on the agenda.
Bullock?
No.
Lipton?
No.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
No.
Pugh?
No.
Robinson?
No.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
No.
Motion fails.
Any other items for consideration for the agenda? Dr. Pugh.
Yes, I move that we place for discussion resolution for Michigan State Board of Education to call for our lawmakers to undo cuts to the fiscal year 25 mental budget, particularly the 31AA mental health and school safety dollars.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? A second by Dr. Robinson. Dr. Pugh, back to you.
Again, as part of the resolution that we just talked about back in June, this body, our board, called for passed a resolution in bipartisan fashion calling for mental health dollars and school safety dollars to be recurring to the tune of $328 million. After that meeting, there was the state legislature passed the budget, and the budget has now been signed. That cuts fiscal year 25 budget, those recurring dollars to the tune of 90+%. And we know that this is a time when the U.S. Surgeon General has talked about gun violence being a public health crisis, something those of us in public health have long known, but also emphasizing the need for mental health care. This is a time where we need to be bolstering our public health professionals, our counselors, and making sure that our school districts have the capacity and the foresight to know that those dollars will be there to be able to build that capacity. And so this resolution would call for this board to join others in pushing for and calling for a supplemental budget to be passed that restores this funding of recurring dollars.
We have a motion. We have a second. We've had some measure of discussion associated with it. Any additional discussion? Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I cannot support adding this to the agenda. This department is on record and has videos instructing teachers how to deceive parents in matters of mental health when gender dysphoria is being seen by students. They specifically are teaching teachers, instructing them how at parent-teacher conferences to deceive parents, how when any communication goes home, like report cards, deceive parents regarding mental health. Therefore, based on this clear, and it's been defended here at the board table, based on that, I have very little doubt that these dollars would be used to continue to undermine parental authority, continue to harm students. Now, if the resolution said this money should be given to parents in the form of tax credits or vouchers so that they can decide whether government employees at government schools is where they want this mental health services to be performed, or whether it is outside of the system that is knowingly deceiving parents currently and being instructed to do so. And instead, those monies were given as vouchers or tax credits to go to their mental health professional of choice in the private sector, maybe faith-based, secular, whatever, then I might be more open to this. But given the history of this department, of that Michigan Department of Education, and the continued desire to deceive parents regarding mental health, I have very little doubt that, that this money would be actually spent for good and very well could be spent for very bad reasons and for reasons that would be harmful to parental authority and what is best for kids.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Dr. Pugh, for clarity, I see you. Dr. Pugh, for clarity, you were talking about Section 31AA funding?
Yes.
Okay. And for clarity, for those listening in the room, for those listening live stream, 31AA funding is 100% distributed to local school districts across the state, 835 local school districts, 56 ISDs, 3,400 schools to serve 1.4 million public school children by 200,000 certificated and non-certificated educators every single day. And the idea that educators are liars is offensive to this chair.
Well, I got to rebut that.
Ms. Snyder, to you.
No, I'm going to allow, sorry, I know I'm not the chair, but you can't just, there's a back and forth here. It's not just a dictatorship.
Anyone else care to share about placing this on the agenda?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan.
Seeing that our non-elected board member decided to chime in and debate the matter, I feel that I should at least rebut it and say that my clear indication was that this department is instructing teachers and staff. I'm not saying who are doing it and who are not. Hopefully, very few are taking the instruction by this department and choosing to deceive parents. But that is what the desire of this department is, and to instruct the locals who will be getting this money on how to deceive parents regarding mental health issues. And so they are trying to instruct a system that will deliver these mental health dollars or services with these dollars, and they are clearly and unapologetically wanting staff at the local level to deceive parents and to harm these students. So my accusation stands. I'm not singling out any local system, any local employee. Hopefully they're not doing what the state desires, but clearly that is the desire by the state, and so I have no indication that these monies will be spent well and could be spent to deceive parents. Thank you.
We have a motion, we have a second, we've had some discussion. Anyone else care to share?
I just want to just make it clear that I do not accept the friendly amendment if that's what that was. And if Board Member McMillan is asking for me to write into this resolution that we give him dollars to oversee the mental health of our children, I just want to be very clear that I will not be adding that to the resolution or amending in that way.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Ms. Snyder, to you.
Spicy discussion already. I will save the rest of it for later. It's a nuanced issue I'll be passing at this point in time, but we'll engage later. I just want to say that, you know, you appeal to the audience, Dr. Rice, in this room about how much money is in 31AA funding and how important it is. I would appeal to you, then stop attaching those dollars to BS. And I'll bet any money they feel the same way. They would like to get back to the business of educating students, which means they shouldn't have to sit and watch videos that your department has come up with to attach to those dollars. So reconsider what you're thinking and your leadership.
Anybody else care to share? Hearing none, a roll call vote on the placement of this item around a budget supplemental to restore children's mental health dollars to the state school aid budget. Ms. Evans.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Pass.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And then could I have a motion to approve the budget, the agenda as amended? Motion by Dr. Robinson, second by Dr. Pritchett. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please, a roll call vote.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
No.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Board, at 10:11, you have an agenda. At this time, Ms. Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You've just been listening to Dr. Michael Rice, Chairperson of the State Board and State Superintendent. To his left around the table, we have Board President, Dr. Pamela Pugh from Saginaw, Board Co-Vice President, Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton from Huntington Woods, NASB Delegate, Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, and Ms. Nikki Snyder from Goodrich. Back to the table to my right are Mr. Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer, Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, Board Co-Vice President, Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield, and Board Secretary, Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Virtually, we have joining us Ms. Stephanie O'Day, the Governor's K-12 Policy Advisor ex officio.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Public may register to provide comment during the public participation portion of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 1 p.m. To provide public comment by telephone, please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage at www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed again on the MDE webpage at www.michigan.gov/MDE. The first item on today's agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting is the presentation of the 2024-2025 Teachers of the Year. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Michelle Harmula, Deputy Superintendent in the Division of Educator Excellence, Career and Technical Education, Special Education and Administrative Law, and Ms. Jennifer Roble, Manager in the Office of Educator Excellence. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Rice, and good morning, board. We're going to talk to you briefly about the Michigan Teacher of the Year program. It is organized by our Michigan Department of Education Office of Educator Excellence and sponsored by the MEMIC Education Foundation. Our program identifies exceptional teachers in our state, recognizes their effective work in classrooms, amplifies their voices, and empowers them to participate in policy discussions at the state level. Teachers are recognized both regionally and at the statewide level. And Jennifer is going to introduce a little bit more in our Teachers of the Year.
Make this a little more upbeat.
That's
Okay.
right.
Regional Teachers of the Year and the Michigan Teacher of the Year comprise the Michigan Teacher Leadership Advisory Council and serve as an invaluable source to the Michigan Department of Education and other state education partners by representing the view of teachers in important policy decisions. And good morning. The Michigan Teacher of the Year represents Michigan teachers at national events organized by the Council of Chief State School Officers, and the Michigan Teacher of the Year is Michigan's candidate for the National Teacher of the Year. The Regional Teachers of the Year and the Michigan Teacher of the Year were selected following a multi-level process that began with hundreds of nominations of teachers by students, staff, and community members. Pam Harlan is the Executive Director of the MEMIC Foundation, and she cannot be here today. She had an emergency at work, but she has been one of the best education partners that I've worked with, and she has graciously given us $70,000 this year for the program, up from $60,000 last year. So the teachers behind me will benefit greatly from that. Dr. Rice and Dr. Pugh, would you please like to join Ms. Lee at the table for the presentations? Teachers of the Year and admins, when your names are called, please come to the table and then cycle back through. I'd also like to thank Ms. Tilley for serving on the panel for the selection process. Once again, she did a phenomenal job. So did you. Oh, thank you. So, are you ready? Region 1 is Michael Powers, who has been teaching for, this will be his 44th year. He is a social studies teacher at Manistee Middle High School in Manistee area schools, and he is here today with his superintendent, Christina Hansen.
Come on, hop into the picture.
This is going long. I think I'm supposed to.
It's all right. This is the first one.
Just read
We
it.
got the cakes then.
Molly Dunham is a third grade teacher at Kingsley Elementary School in Kingsley area schools. And today, to accept the plaque for Kingsley area schools is Principal Kristen Goethals. so excited.
Practice for school pictures.
Region 3 is Kristen Ritter, a math teacher at Greenville High School in Greenville Public Schools. Here to accept the plaque today is Superintendent Wayne Rodell, Principal Danelle Nada, and former Principal Michelle Blazinski. Region 4 is Laura Baker, an English teacher at Shepherd High School in Shepherd Public Schools, and today with her is Superintendent Carrie Gauthier. Region 5 is Sasha Wakefield, a math teacher at Clio High School and Clio area schools. Today with her is Superintendent Lisa Taylor, Principal Scott Williams, and Assistant Principal Rachel Traver.
Thank you.
This is her. I mean, that's her.
David, can we have one more? Oh, sir. You're welcome.
Region 6 is Cassandra Eberhardt. She is a social studies teacher at Williamston Middle School and Williamston Community Schools. And today with her is assistant principal of the middle school, Adam Supanowski. Was I close? Okay, thanks. Oh, switch.
All right.
Region 7 is Melissa Frost, a science teacher at Buchanan High School and Buchanan Community Schools. And with her today is Superintendent Patricia Robinson and Principal Brian Pruitt.
No, you get to be next to your wife. I'm not sure what.
Region 8 is Christina Dennis. She's a third grade teacher at Onstead Elementary School and Onstead Community Schools. And today with her is Principal Marsha Davis. Region 10 is Kelvin Nellum. He is a science teacher at the Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences in Detroit. And today with him is the Chief Academic Officer, Lawrence Hood.
Yeah, hold that up there. One more. Thank you.
And lastly, I would like to introduce to you today the Region 9 Teacher of the Year and the 24-25 Michigan Teacher of the Year, Kelly Kuzmano. She is an English teacher and a student leadership teacher at Rochester High School and Rochester Community Schools. And today with her is Josh Rinkle, the principal of Rochester High School.
And a happy birthday to Kelly yesterday. 2 great days in a row.
I know. And she just got off the plane from Ireland.
Oh,
So.
You never know who you're going to talk to. Is he going to talk to her?
Just want to go through. I think I saw that movie.
Yeah, right.
Boy, they are.
I don't know what we do here.
So now let's watch the moment when Kelly was named the new Michigan Teacher of the Year.
It is my great pleasure to introduce a very special guest. Dr. Michael F. Rice is the State of Michigan's Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Students, every year across the state, we celebrate 10 outstanding teachers as Regional Teachers of the Year. Your very own Ms. Kelly Kuzmano was recently recognized as a Michigan Regional Teacher of the Year to represent the entire Rochester Community Schools. Please give her a big round of applause. It's hard to keep a good secret from an entire state. Today we're here to share some great news of over 85,000 public school teachers in Michigan. The 2024-2025 Michigan Teacher of the Year, the Teacher of the Year for the whole state of Michigan, is one of your teachers, Ms. Kelly Kuzmano.
Got a commercial.
Dr. Rice?
So, Ms. Robo, as parties go, you sure can throw them.
Thank you, sir.
That was a terrific moment and an exciting moment, a tribute to not only Kelly Kuzmano, but our teaching profession across the state of Michigan, regularly uplifting our children each and every day, doing wonderful things for our kids with difficult circumstances each and every day. So we appreciate Kelly, we appreciate our Regional Teachers of the Year, we appreciate all of their educators and family members who are supportive of them, and we appreciate their representation on behalf of all of the profession across the state. Could I please have a motion in support of Ms. Kelly Kuzmano as Michigan Teacher of the Year for 2024-2025?
Support.
Ms. Tilley moves. Could I have a second? Second by Dr. Robinson. Any discussion associated therewith? Ms. Tilley?
I just just want to say congratulations to you and to all of you. You guys are the best of the best for 24-25. And I was so excited to hear from everybody, to get the presentations. You all did a wonderful job. And I hope that this is going to be an amazing year for you guys as you take this journey and you all work together and get to know one another and really help lead education for our state. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Tilley. Anybody else care to share? Ms. Lipton?
I just wanted to congratulate all of you. I had the opportunity to be at the announcement event for Ms. Cusmano and to see the thrill in the students' eyes, the love in their hearts, was really inspiring, and it really was just a joy to see the connection that you and all of you have with your students and that the students have with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton. Anyone else before we have a roll call vote? Okay. Ms. Evans, let's see if there are any hanging chads.
Bullock?
Yes.
Lipton?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you. Can I give a shout out to the interpreter behind you? Her name is Sarah, and her son will be featured in a Proud Michigan Educator video coming up. Tell
Thank you.
Jacob I said hi.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robel, Dr. Harmala. The next item on today's agenda is a presentation on Goal 8, Fiscal Year 25 Budget Overview. This presentation will provide an overview about items related to Goal 8, adequate and equitable school funding for students and staff in the state of Michigan. Will provide an overview specifically about fiscal year 25 budget and fiscal year 24 budget supplemental. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Diane Golzinski, Deputy Superintendent of the Division of Business, Health, and Library Services, and Mr. Spencer Simmons, Director of the Office of Financial Management. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Good morning. What a pleasure to follow our Teacher of the Year. It is just wonderful. And we, as Dr. Rice said, we are here today to talk about the fiscal year 25 budget, which will start October 1st and was recently signed by the governor. We will talk today specifically about all of the state strategic education plan goals and what components of the budget fit within our strategic education plan. We'll start off with the joy of MIPSers, the Michigan Public School Employees Retirement System. The FY25 budget includes adjustments to the MIPSers contribution rates. I'm sure you have heard about this in the news. 5.75 percentage point offset. What does that mean? What districts contribute will change from 20.96 to 15.21. which is equivalent to $598 million statewide. This $598 million is ongoing, and it is equivalent on average to more than a 4% increase in the foundation allowance for traditional public school districts. What you will see on paper is that the foundation allowance did not change. It remains the same as fiscal year 24 at $9,608 per pupil. But remember, districts will be contributing less to MIPSers, so they will have additional funding available. For cyber schools, cyber public school academies, their foundation allowance remains the same at $9,150. There is also a $57 million line item, Section 22E. This is a per pupil payment increase to non-cyber PSAs, which is approximately 3.9% of the foundation allowance, or $375 per pupil. This is specific to PSAs that do not participate in MIPSers. So they don't see that contribution rate change because they're not participating in MIPSers. As a result, they have a small increase to their per pupil foundation allowance. In addition, those who contribute to the retiree health care as a result of retirement reform in 2012, They're currently contributing 3%, and that 3% will go away for this year. That's equivalent to $180 million statewide, and it is one-time funding.
Still under Goal 8, providing adequate and equitable school funding, there's an $82.9 million increase between 2024 to 2025 for economically disadvantaged students, Section 31A, a $522.5 million increase from $512.5 million in FY22 to $1.03 billion in FY25. Under Section 31A, teacher recruitment and retention, in a district that falls in the bands of 5 or 6 of the Opportunity Index, which is 73% of economically disadvantaged, up to 30% of the district's 31A dollars can be used to support recruitment and retention efforts that help reduce staff turnover and vacancies of instructional and staff support. Under lowering class sizes, kindergarten through 3rd grade, in a school building that falls in bands 5 or 6 of the Opportunity Index, 73% of economically disadvantaged, up to 30% of the district's 31A dollars can be used to reduce the teacher to pupil ratio in grades kindergarten to 3rd grade in that school. There's a $10.4 million increase from $25.2 million in 2022 to $50.2 million in 2025. It requires that the Department of Education develop an English learner program models by March 1st of 2025 that establish a minimum number of minutes per week that districts must provide direct English language instruction for students according to the students' proficiency levels. It is the intent of legislation that beginning in 25 to 2026, a district must agree to meet or exceed the minimum number of minutes per week to be eligible for Section 41 funding. This funding has been identified as recurring. There's an $8.4 million increase for students with disabilities under Section 51E. It was $409.4 million. It's a $409.4 million increase from $90.2 million in FY22 under Section 51F to $499.6 million in 2025 to now the new section of 51E. This funding also has been identified as recurring. There's a $705,900 increase for students in rural and isolated districts under Section 22D. It's a $3.88 million increase from $8.4 million in 2022 to $12.3 million in 2025. This has been identified as recurring funds. A $6.1 million in funding is maintained in partnership district funding under Section 21H. In 2024, there's $36 million that was actually awarded to be spread out over 3 years under partnership districts. For the years of 2024, $12 million, 2025, $12 million, and 2026, $12 million. Over those 3 years, this funding has been identified as recurring. $125 million in funding is maintained to reimburse districts for the cost of school transportation under Section 22L. The funding does come from the School Transportation Fund. There is $100 million remaining within this fund. Please note that after this funding is fully expended, there will not be any funding used to replenish this fund. This has been identified as non-recurring. Under the School Consolidation and Infrastructure Section 12C, there was originally $245 million within that fund. There has been an adjustment to the $245 million in the amount of $110 million. The remaining balance is $135 million to support consolidation efforts. There has been an addition to 12C, which adds emergency allocations as an allowable use in the event that a district has an infrastructure emergency that lacks the funding to fix it. They would then send a request to the Michigan Department of Education. The state superintendent would then actually send the actual emergency request to the state treasurer and the state budget director for review and approval. The $110 million that was originally in Section 12C has now been moved to Section 12D. Within that, the funding breakdown is $75 million allocated from the Consolidation and Infrastructure Fund for grants to districts and ISDs to support costs related to internal consolidation and infrastructure. There's $15 million to Detroit Public School Community Districts for Cooley High School Athletic Complex construction, $10 million for Wayne Reese Academic Professional Building construction in Wayne, $5 million for Beecher High School construction, $4 million to build a new high school in Taylor School District, and $1 million to support building infrastructure upgrades in Hamtramck School District.
Moving now to Goal 7, which is to increase the numbers of certified teachers in areas of shortage. You will see $25 million and $50 million both maintained, one for the Michigan Future Educator Fellowship Program and one for the My Future Educator Student Teacher Stipends. sections 27A and 27C. New in fiscal year 25 is $12.5 million to support educator talent initiatives and programs in section 27G. Section 27K is $25 million for student loan repayment. This includes a $600,000 contract for a vendor to make a portal so that those educators can apply on their own behalf. $12.5 million for Talent Together, their Grow Your Own initiative, which is to be used for paying tuition, fees, and associated costs to ensure a no-cost pathway to certification. $7 million to support the West Michigan Teacher Collaborative, Grow Your Own. $2.5 million to support the Black Male Educator Alliance. And $3 million for Teach for America's Teach Michigan initiative. Under Goal 3, improve the health, safety, and wellness of students. $200 million for the Michigan School Meals Program. This is the program that provides free breakfast and lunch to every public school student in the state. $170 million of that is in state school aid funding, and $30 million of that comes from the School Meals Reserve Fund. We also have $26.5 million of recurring funds for mental health and school safety, which is section 31AA that you discussed this morning. This is a decrease from $310 million to the $25 million for public schools, and a decrease from $18 million to $1.5 million for non-public schools. The $25 million is recurring, the $1.5 million is non-recurring. There is also $107.8 maintained in the school mental health and support grants, which is section 31N. If you remember, in fiscal year 2019, that was the very first infusion of dollars to support mental health in schools. Also under Goal 3, there's $11.6 million for hearing, vision, and dental screenings. That's a $5 million increase from fiscal year 24, and $1 million maintained for the pilot program to distribute feminine hygiene products upon request to eligible students.
Under goal number 1, expanding early childhood learning opportunities, there's $11.9 million increase for the Great Start Readiness Program, section 32D, which is now assigned to MyLeap. Under this, a full day allocation increased to $10,185 per child. This is estimated to serve an additional 5,000 children, and it includes $25 million in funding for GSRP startup grants under section 32D, subsection 29. This is an increase of almost $112 million from 24 to 25 and over the current fiscal year, and a rise of almost $358 million from 2022 to 2025. This funding has been identified as recurring. Under the 32D boilerplate is the intent that 32D will support universal GSRP in the future fiscal year. Revises eligibility threshold to 400% of the federal poverty level, and it removes the requirement that tuition be charged on a sliding scale for household incomes above 300% of the federal poverty level. Allows programs to enroll children with birthdays between September 1st and December 1st before their current enrollment date on or after September 1st, but maintains prioritization for older 4-year-olds. Allows MyLeap to waive program eligibility requirements for certain licensed child care providers, but requires providers to meet program eligibility requirements within 2 years or 3 years of program credentialing. Allows GSRP to implement Head Start national performance standards for quality as an alternative to GSRP policies and regulations. There's $1.36 million increase for early on section 32D, which also is assigned to MyLeap. This is $9.52 million increase from $14.15 million in FY22 to $23.67 million in FY25. This funding has been identified as recurring. A new section to improve early literacy under goal number 2, improving early literacy achievement, $87 million to improve educational outcomes in literacy, section 35M. Michigan Department of Education will create a committee for literacy achievement, appoint its members, and determine size, timeline, and benchmarks. The committee will evaluate early literacy series and materials, literacy professional development, and other literacy tools. Then it will create a rankings list. Districts will receive more funding for higher ranked materials. Also, under goal number 2, a new section, $10 million for Read Innovation Competition. Section 35N. MDE will establish the structure for the Read Innovation Competition. Startup funding will go to eligible districts to develop and deploy innovative literacy initiatives.
Under Goal 4, expand learning opportunities for all students. $39.8 million for CTE programming in Section 61A. That's a $2.3 million increase over the base funding of $37.6 million in FY24. $304,300 increase, which is 6% for CTE incentive payments. Those are additional per pupil payments for those enrolled in CTE on a per pupil basis when they're enrolled in a critical skill or high demand career field. We also have additional opportunities within the state school aid budget. A new section, Section 27F, is $4 million to support the Michigan Education Justice Coalition. And under that section, specifically $2.8 million must be used to create and implement a toolkit that is evidence-based and provides culturally responsive intervention and solutions to address racial disparities in K-12 education. $600,000 must be used to fund a participatory action research study with teachers of color in districts with higher concentration of poverty and lower academic outcomes. And $550,000 must be used to investigate the school to prison pipeline. We also have $25 million increase for competitive grants for before and after school programs and summer programs. That is known as Section 32N, and that goes to MyLeap. We also have $1 million to support MARY, which is the Michigan Education Research Institute. Their purpose is to expand research that includes educator shortage, early literacy initiative outcomes, and early childhood development programming outcomes. In the MDE budget, you will see 10 additional FTEs or positions available to the department, 3 for grants administration and management, 2 for summer EBT food benefits, 2 for the comprehensive mental health and district technical assistance work, 1 for CTE administration, 1 for the Office of Financial Management, and one FTE with one-time funding to support the charter school transparency database. Other funding for the department through the MDE budget is a $1 million increase in state aid to libraries. That is funding that is distributed equally based on size to each of the public libraries across the state. $325,000 in one-time funding for community health worker career center program development. $275,000 of one-time funding for mental health training that is specific for training administrators on how to maximize Medicaid reimbursement, and $100,000 increase for the Michigan Test for Teacher Certification reimbursement. We are hearing about budget supplemental, and some of the budget supplemental considerations that we wanted to share with you is one of your resolutions is to restoration of some portion of the Children's Mental Health and School Safety Funding, which is Section 31AA, and also adjustments to the MIPSR's contribution rates beyond FY25, or excuse me, in FY25. As I was talking about earlier with that Section 22E funding, that's the per pupil funding to PSAs that do not have staff contributing to MIPSRs. 42 PSAs have one or more employees currently participating in MIPSRs, which makes that PSA ineligible for that per pupil funding in Section 22E. As a result, those PSAs will receive very different funding increases from one another. We also feel that it's really important for additional future budgets that we consider reducing the burdensome retirement contribution rate over a period of years to a more reasonable level. There are bills out to do that, but none of those bills passed during the most recent session. So with that, what questions can we answer?
Thank you very much, presenters, board members. Questions or thoughts? Ms. Snyder.
Can we get the material rankings for the early literacy funding?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Can we get the material rankings for the early literacy funding? What I heard you say.
Section 35M?
It was $87 million for early literacy ranking materials. You get more reimbursement at the local level for, depending on the rankings. Can you provide us with those ranked materials in the next couple of meetings?
If I could, okay. This is a long-time project. We will be discussing it at the September board meeting in depth. You are not going to get anything in the next couple of weeks. It requires the establishment of a committee and the vetting of materials across the state. It is a multi-year project.
Okay, I said couple months, sorry, but it sounds like you have a plan to.
We do.
Okay, to present to us next month.
Yes.
You said, okay. I know we didn't approve the resolutions this morning. However, the question I have for you is very honest, given the fact that the U.S. Department of Education has said, the last time we took funds away was in '97. How much do you think that would be, and how would it impact the budget you've just presented? Where would it come from?
If I could, you're not weighing in on legal issues now, okay? It's not happening, okay? We're not engaging in a series of hypotheticals. You've had the opportunity to put your resolution on the table. The board voted it down. Do you have another question?
Just that if we engage in hypotheticals in other areas, we do need to engage in the hypothetical of this area.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tilley?
I was very happy to see the funding going towards the prison to pipeline research, and wanted to know, do we have any more information about that yet? How is that going to look?
I do not at this time.
Thank you.
Ms. Tilley, could you repeat your question?
There's $550,000 to investigate the school to prison pipeline. Just wanted to know if we had any more information of how that is going to look.
This is the Michigan Ed Justice Committee. Yeah, we'll get you more information. It's actually a series of items summing up to $2.4 million. We'll get you more information on that.
Is it possible in a few months maybe they could come give us a presentation?
We can certainly consider it, but let us get you initial information, see what additional questions you have, and if there's a value to that, we can certainly consider that. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? I'm sorry, Ms.
No.
Okay, very good. Dr. Pugh and Mr. McMillan.
And I just wanted to piggyback on what Board Member Tilley was asking. I too am really happy to see that. And in any preliminary data that we could see, if we could look at some stats. I've dug out some stats that look at like per prisoner costs that we're paying versus the 900 plus per student. If we could get some of that information ahead of time or in that initial presentation. And I'm sure that will continue to be unpackaged as they do more studies. But that is the stat that we commonly hear, but would really like to hear a more updated and more real number around those rates. And I guess I'll go ahead and then get my other questions into. I have noted page 13, and I don't know if Dr. Robinson has more questions on this, but he's really talked about the literacy, the competition. And I am happy to see that these budget items are in MDE's budget versus MyLeap's budget, but still would like to hear more about innovative competition because I'm sure that, I don't want to speak for Dr. Robinson, but he brought up some really good points a few board meetings ago about competition. And so I too would like to hear more about that. Again, happy to see that it's on, within this education department versus the other, but still have questions about that. And let me see, I'm sorry.
So if I could, Dr. Pugh,
Okay.
let me just respond to that now. As I said in response to Ms. Snyder's question, we are doing a presentation on literacy next month. We will be unpacking those two grants. We were not, as a rule, supportive of the notion of a competition. As a rule, we believe that dollars ought to be distributed to local school districts, that they ought not to have to compete for what they need. So we disagreed with the premise behind this. However, at the end of the day, there was going to be a competition. That was clear in the budget negotiations. And so the question became, what was the context around that? What were the contours around that? Who was going to manage that? And we felt more comfortable, obviously, doing it ourselves than having some outside entity doing it. So that's number one. But we will unpack these two and some other literacy-related efforts at the September State Board meeting. Yeah.
And then my other question, slides 29 and 30 on page 15. Well, I guess it would be 29 as well as, I guess, any other, like the after-school programming or any of the early childhood dollars that go to MyLeap, I guess. And I do see that we have additional FTEs, which again, I'm happy to see. I don't know if that's still, if that's yet making us whole, but just wondering, we talked about unfunded mandates was the term that I used, but if MyLeap is now doing some of the work of that the Department of Education was doing, are we made whole for the portions that we're still required to do? Because I understand that U.S. Department of Education was still holding the Department of Ed, Michigan Department of Education, responsible for some of these components.
So MDE was underfunded pre-MyLeap. It remains underfunded and unstaffed post-MyLeap.
Right.
So that's number one.
Even with the additional of
Even with the
yes,
additional
yes.
10.
Okay.
Right. There's no question about that. MyLeap is now responsible for early childhood education in the state. The staff responsible for handling early childhood education have migrated to MyLeap. The exception to which you refer is financial management. We continue to handle MyLeap's financial management for two separate sets of reasons. One, we are responsible for certain early childhood grants according to the feds through fiscal year 24 end, which is through September 30th, 2024. That's number one. And number two, the SEA is required, irrespective of a state executive order, to be responsible for the financial management and oversight of particular federal programs. And so we will retain financial management of those programs post-September 30th into the new fiscal year. So a distinction between, say, for example, childcare, which ends September 30th, 2024, and 21st century community learning centers for which we are responsible post-September 30th, that is to say, in ensuing fiscal years. So to that question, we were funded and understaffed pre-MyLeap. We remain underfunded and understaffed post-MyLeap, both as a function of that and well beyond that in other areas.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly, and I think I hear you. So before MyLeap, we were understaffed. post my leap and post these new additional FTEs,
Right.
we're understaffed. But we still have remaining burden
We do.
that is now funded. Let me say we, MDE now has remaining burden that is unfunded, but is now funded under my leap.
So that was a lot. Let me try to unpack that. We retain responsibilities associated with programs that are nominally the province of my league. Okay? We also retain financial responsibility or financial management responsibility for those that are more than nominally the province of my league. So take childcare, for example. Childcare is currently run by my league. It was run the previous decade plus, 12 years, by MDE. It migrated December 1st, 2023 to my league. We're still responsible for the financial management of that through the end of the fiscal year. We will continue to be responsible for the financial management of 21st Century Community Learning Center programs into the new fiscal year and in relative perpetuity, because the SEA, per federal statute, is responsible for these programs irrespective of any executive order. And if your question is there a burden to that? There is. We are nominally compensated for that burden. But it's one thing to be compensated in dollars. It's another thing to have the staff to get it done.
So in layman's term, they're getting paid for work that we're still responsible to do.
No,
They and
we're
my
getting
league.
paid for work that we're doing on their behalf. We are getting paid to do their financial management.
So it's enough.
I did not say that.
As your board president,
I did not say that. We are getting paid, but the dollars are not the challenge. The challenge is the staffing. The challenge is having the requisite staffing to handle the financial management burden.
So why don't we have the staffing? Is because we just can't get the staffing, or because we don't have the dollars to get the staffing?
It's one thing to have the dollars. It's another thing to be able to convert them into staff that can do the
So
work.
we have the dollars to get the staffing.
We have some dollars.
So my league, is getting paid for work that we don't have the dollars to pay the staffing and/or the staffing to do.
My Leap is responsible per an executive order. They have a budget. They, through an interagency agreement, have the responsibility to fund the financial management of their programs with us. But the dollars don't fully address the challenge, because the challenge is primarily, not exclusively, in humans rather than simply the dollars associated therewith. Ms. Tilley.
What is the compensation? Normally, fiduciaries get at least 10%. So what is the compensation? Is it 10% or greater?
I think what we'll do, because this is an involved area, we're happy to share information in board brief on this. We'll give you some granular on this in board brief, and you can chew on it. And if you have additional questions, we're happy to answer those.
And who manages the grant? What's their role normally?
The grant management, the grant management from a program side is My Leap's.
No. I know that the implementation part of it is my league's responsibility. The department's responsibility as far as a fiduciary. Who is that specifically somebody that is up under grant management here for the department?
It is.
Okay.
Right.
I was gonna ask another question, I can't remember. I do wanna go back to the slide that I was working on, before. I had questions about, yes, the other bullet points. So the first one is addressing the achievement gap. That's something incredibly important as well. The second one, can you explain the second one more in depth?
We'll get you more information on them. The lines in the budget are very sparse.
And are there gonna be ways, or are there already ways that the department partners with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition, and how will we support this initiative?
We would be happy to partner with. The budget is silent to that, okay? The budget talks to a grant allocation. It does not talk to partnering.
Right.
So typically what would happen in this circumstance is if the grantee has an interest in partnering and in collaborating, then we do that. If not, there's nothing that requires the grantee to partner with the grantor with us.
I just think in order to make this more successful, that there should be some type of partnership or support.
I agree, and I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to address this to at the end of the table as far as the 87 million. I'd like to go back to that and the 10 million for literacy. And like our president, I'm glad that it did not end up at MyLeap. However, I'm still concerned about this committee. Who's going to be specifically deciding who's on the committee for the literacy achievement?
The department will decide. The department will appoint.
Okay, and in the presentation in September, I would like to know: will the committee be formed by then?
Not.
Not.
I will say we are currently working with a group of educational professionals in literacy. So there is a significant portion of this structure already exists. But your question is about the formality. What I heard your question being was about the formality of the committee's creation.
Right.
And the answer is it will not be formed in 4 weeks prior to the beginning of fiscal year 25.
Okay. I would like, when the committee is formed, or actually to be taken into consideration who should be on the committee, where these so-called experts stood regarding the failed Lucy Calkins literacy curriculum and reading curriculum. And it really gets to the point where I'm concerned about a centralized body determining what is high-ranked and what's not. Clearly, if this was done 10 years ago, they would have highly ranked something that is a failure and harming kids in literacy. Those so-called experts probably would. Now, hopefully, you'll get some that think outside the box and aren't, one mantra. And that's why I'd like to know where each one stands, or where they stood on Lucy Calkins and those so-called failed literacy curriculum. And to that, I guess I remember Democrats opposing categoricals when Republicans were deciding where they went. It seems now that, and just giving everybody the money and letting them decide at the local level what is best. I certainly want good literacy tools, but I'm not confident that when you centralize it, then there's more money. And when there's more money, there's more special interests, there's more vendors that are, trying to bargain and cajole and get people to vote one way or the other. When you decentralize it, quite frankly, some may say, well, we can't trust the locals to actually do what's best for the kids. But I would trust them more than I would a centralized body that has a lot more money. So that's
to say you trust the status quo?
I would trust.
And the results associated with the
I
status quo?
I would trust, well, given that the status quo will probably be the people on this committee, yes. So the ones that were fine with the status quo 10 years ago when it was a failure. Now, maybe you'll surprise me. Maybe these people will all be new thinkers who haven't come from the establishment. But I doubt it, but I'd
So
love
may I
for
ask
you
a
to
question?
surprise me.
So you're concerned about the status quo being replaced by people on a committee representing the status quo?
No, okay, are we going to debate this or, I mean, I guess.
I'm just trying to get clarity.
No, the people that are going to be making the decisions, if they supported the status quo, I'm more supportive of locals seeing the errors of the past or just looking for what's best. I mean, like I said, when you get a bigger body, when you centralize decisions, you end up with vendors and special interests weighing in who don't have the kids' best interests at heart. They have money at heart. And so that's what ends up happening when you centralize education and centralize decisions like this. That's all I'm saying. So it's cute what you're trying to do, but I'm pretty clear. And I've been this way for the last 8 years and 25 years in education that I support local control. And Democrats used to when it came to categoricals. But now that they're making the decisions, they like to tell, to decide where things will go. And I don't know, the centralization bothers me. It always has, and you know that. Secondly, regarding the Michigan Education Justice Coalition, will be, and I think I'm addressing the people at the end of the table, this end. Will that group take into consideration compensatory education that is lacking from students that were harmed during COVID, whether they're students of color or not?
What slide are you on, please?
Slide 28.
It's the
Can we move to slide 28, please? So
That's it right there.
Okay, all right.
I mean, will that be one of their concerns, is the lack of compensatory education that was provided during COVID to some of these students, whether they are students of color or not?
That is not referenced in the State School Aid Act language.
Okay.
Again, the State School Aid Act language is extraordinarily slender on this.
Okay.
Regarding... It leaves a lot, I'm sorry, let me just finish because 3 board members have asked about this. This is one budget line in a document of hundreds of pages. And it provides a lot of room for interpretation. But to your specific question, it doesn't focus on COVID. It doesn't focus on so-called compensatory education.
And then finally, on slide 21, it mentions $1 million funding for a pilot project for districts to distribute feminine hygiene products. I'm curious, will that, in Michigan, will that require, like it does in Minnesota, the governor of Minnesota signed a law requiring feminine products in boys' bathrooms. Will that be this case here in Michigan where feminine hygiene products under this pilot program will be required or encouraged to be put in boys' bathrooms?
The language of that line item is not that specific.
Okay, so it could or it may or may not.
It would depend on the local district's choice.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Other board members? Ms. Lipton, Ms. Snyder.
Thank you. The per pupil allotment of $9,608, how does that compare to what the SFRC suggests should be the base allowance? I can't remember. It seems to me that the most recent report put it at around 10,000.
No,
I'm just
the initial report was mid-11,000s. The 2021 update, it hasn't been updated for 3 years, put it at 13,000 and change.
Okay, so
Still lower.
we're still working toward it, but the fact that we didn't see an increase this year, that just creates the gap that, in other words, by not Well, actually, that's not entirely true, because there is some suggestion that the fact that the school districts don't have to pay into MIPSers has created.
Right, so the $598 million is ish a 4% increase for traditional public school districts. So that is, for all intents and purposes, the foundation allowance increase by any
right.
other name, okay? But to your question, it does not help local school districts make up for a very substantial gap between what SFRC says and where we are, inflation adjusted.
Yep.
So it's a nominal increase, yes, but inflation adjusted, it is, for all intents and purposes, no increase. And that's really important to note. We're a considerable distance from where we were supposed to be under School Finance Research Collaborative, substantially underfunded in the base, let alone all the categoricals for children with greater needs that require greater funding.
Right, because my recollection was that when you looked at that 13,000-ish increased to even more when you looked at students living in poverty, students living in
Without a doubt.
Special ed. Okay, I just wanted to point out, as someone that's really thought about this for a long time, that we still have a gap.
Yes.
Right, and so to your point, children who are economically disadvantaged, poor children, are supposed to be funded under SFRC, under the School Finance Research Collaborative recommendations, at 35% more
Right.
than the base,
Yep.
and the base is supposed to be over 13,000.
Yes.
So to be clear, we've had a couple of very strong budgets in a row, fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 historic budgets, and particularly back-to-back extraordinary budgets. But we remain billions of dollars underfunded relative to School Finance Research Collaborative recommendations.
And yes, okay, I just wanted to just highlight that. The $125 million for costs of transportation. My recollection is that we had prior board meetings that talked about a separate transportation study.
Mm-hmm.
The $125 million put into transportation, was that in any way reflective of information that has come out of the study, or where are we at in understanding our transportation challenges, particularly in rural districts?
Sure. So Macomb ISD has been working with a group of transportation experts on the transportation study. The first iteration of what they recommended to the legislature was to look at the way the funding formula worked to distribute the funding. So the first round of Section 22L, which the department advocated for getting, had the districts broke up into quartiles, depending on where the district fell based on students per square mile. The districts were broken into quartiles, and that's how the funding was determined. That study determined that that still wasn't an adequate way of getting at the right transportation reimbursement for districts, and so it recommended octiles, or 8 breakups, rather than just 4. And so that change was made in the FY25 budget. That group is still working. Now what they're looking at is square miles versus miles versus square miles. What's better? Is it important to just look at academic miles, or do you include other miles in which the buses may transport students? So they're still continuing to come up with recommendations. And what we intend to see is, over a few years, tweaks to this particular line item so we can get better at reimbursing those districts that put more money into student transportation.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so it's an ongoing.
It is ongoing, yes.
Based on, okay, thank you for that. Do we suspect that 125 million is close to what it should be?
Not.
My recollection is that
It is not. It is,
it was
it's the best we've ever had
Yeah.
in fiscal year '24. This is the first time we had this category in fiscal year '24. To extend it into fiscal year '25, we appreciate it. It's another $125 million. It is taking down a fund which was originally established at $350 million. So 125 in the 1 year, 125 in the second year. That will leave $100 million left in the fund. It is not sufficient. It is far more than we've ever had. To have $1/8 of a billion is a big deal, particularly to address rural equity. Because it is rural school districts that transport more substantially and have a greater per pupil transportation cost than on average do their suburban and
longer.
urban peers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
longer distance.
Anything else?
The line item, I don't have the slide, but I just wrote down the consolidation effort line item reduced to $135 million from $224 million. My question is anyone using that? Have we gotten any information from districts that are looking to consolidate? Because I know this is something that you know, it's been talked about for a long time, that somehow that, you know, we have to right-size the number of districts. So my sense is that this line item was an attempt to try to get to that, but I'm wondering, it's been reduced. Is it based on any reflection of
Interest.
Thank you, interest by districts to actually go through this? Or is the legislature still just sort of maybe
It is based on a...
blindly?
No. The legislature is reflecting upon the relative need between infrastructure and consolidation in the state. The governor put in her fiscal year '23 executive budget recommendation $1 billion over 6 years for infrastructure. And that became $475 million in a split infrastructure/consolidation fund. And it has subsequently been amended and re-amended, recognizing that there's far more interest in and need for infrastructure dollars than consolidation dollars.
Okay.
But yes, there is an interest in consolidation dollars. There's been a grant application. There have been grant applications that have been put out based on grant solicitation. And we've awarded to, I don't know, 15, 18 different districts. Some ISDs, some LEAs.
Okay.
So there's more interest in this than there was in 2011. On the other hand, there are more dollars associated with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Okay. Anything else before we pivot to Ms. Snyder, Dr. Pritchett, and the next presentation before lunch?
I just wanted to I just have
Please,
a couple more
yeah.
questions. I just wanted to point out that the support of MEJC, that's a direct appropriation to MEJC. My reading of that section, they've got their own boilerplate. You're providing this, you know, as information to us, but when the legislature makes a direct appropriation and they speak in their boilerplate, that's what MEJC has to be concerned about. It doesn't, I mean, it's good information to know.
It is.
But this is not a department appropriation.
Correct.
It's
That doesn't preclude the organization from having an interest in working with us. But the reality is that the organization doesn't have to, literally doesn't have to inform us of anything except that we are finished.
right. I mean, they would have lobbied for that
Right.
appropriation separately.
Correct.
And I just wanted to just, again, I don't recall the slide, but there's a slide where there were specific direct appropriations to school districts for infrastructure. That seemed unusual to me. I mean, it's been a long time, but when I was on appropriations, I don't remember districts necessarily in the budget getting specific. Is that because this is a new infrastructure line item?
It's a question.
Okay, because I'd never seen that before, you know, where it's 75 to a particular school district for a specific purpose. So I was just
Well, the 75
seemed
million, the
unusual, but-
$75 million is broader, but the elements underneath that sum
all
to
of those.
$35 million, those are discrete. Those are to individual entities.
Entities, right.
And I think
And
it's.
they don't go through the department. I mean, those are direct.
They do not. I think it's
appropriations.
a good question.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lipton, Ms. Snyder, Dr. Pritchett, and to our last presentation prior to lunch.
I'll make it very quick just to go back to the school to prison pipeline. There is a lot of information through the American Bar Association, and even Michigan had a white paper on the racial composition of teachers in Michigan in 2018. There's a lot of research already out there, so to investigate it, I feel like yes, but it would be great to see some kind of action, very direct action plan to it, because that's a lot of money that really should be applied to what has already been done. Like if you look at the ABA's website, they talk about really differentiating behavioral discipline strategies that aren't necessary. Things like keeping your hat on in class and how that escalates more willful defiance, if you will. There's a ton of research on what's happening in the justice system as it relates to how we view behavior and policy within it. So, and if that can be woven into our partnership district, I don't know if our partnership districts have any goals within them that relate to school to prison pipeline. So what we investigate, they actually receive the information, and there is a partnership in that sense. It seems like you could really accomplish more and quickly with what's already out there and the infrastructure we have with partnership districts. So just throwing that out there. That's it.
Thank you. Dr. Pritchett?
Thank you. Very quickly, slides 16 and 17 deal with the increased number of certified teachers, and it lists, by the time you add it up, comes up to 25 million. Talent Together, West Michigan Teacher Collaborative, Black Male Educator Alliance, and Teach for America. The only one of these that indicates that someone needs to submit a progress report to MDE is Teach for America. Do we know about the others? Is there some sort of reporting back to even the legislature, or do we know? Related to, I mean, I'm just asking at this point.
I do not see anything in that language.
Okay.
Specific to a report back to the legislature.
Okay. And one quick one, the report, MERI, M-E-R-I, who is going to get that report? Do we know?
I mean, I want to say, when the legislature puts in language, it's all over the place.
Right.
It's reports to the governor, it's reports to education chairs, it's report to the entire legislature, it's reports to the department. We get all of these reports. What we're able to do with them, how they inform policy development is a different question. But the formality of the legislative language is truly all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, please.
30 seconds. Regarding that Section 99G, the $1 million pilot program on feminine hygiene products, will the reporting require where it goes? Because would we know if it's being used to distribute feminine hygiene products in boys' bathrooms? Because I just think that's plain weird.
We will know which districts.
But not how they used it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Thank you, presenters. Have a good day. Board, the next item on today's agenda is a presentation on children's mental health. Presentation on children's mental health, which is a part of Goal 3 of the Top 10 Strategic Education Plan, will provide an update on the work of local and intermediate school districts in the state to establish a comprehensive school mental health system, resources and partnerships to improve the health, safety, and wellness of students. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Diane Golzinski, Mr. Scott Hutchins, Supervisor in the Office of Health and Safety, School Behavioral Health Unit, Amy Trenko, Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services, West Shore Educational Service District, and Monique Salimos.
Very good.
I practiced it all night. General Education Social Worker in the West Shore Education Service District. Joining us in the room today, we also have Dr. Jason Jeffrey, Superintendent of the West Shore Educational Service District. We welcome you all. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required, except board to listen attentively and ask good questions, but not too many questions prior to lunch. Presenters, welcome.
All right, good morning again. It is great to be back with you, this time to talk specifically about Goal 3, which is to improve the health, safety, and wellness of all learners. Board, the research is very clear that when children have unaddressed mental health challenges, then they are not their best at school. And we know from pandemic data that 1 in 3 high school students experienced poor mental health during that time. 1 in 6 adolescents experienced a major depressive episode, and 20% of teens seriously considered suicide. Schools can eliminate the barriers and help provide access to needed services for many young people. They can establish referral systems and help connect both students and their families to that community-based sources of care. It is really important to recognize that when students have access to mental health supports at school, they are 6 times more likely to receive the interventions they need so they can be the best students possible. The U.S. Department of Education's Raise the Bar initiative is specific to mental health and well-being, and it has 3 primary pillars: to build capacity, to grow the profession, and to focus on sustainability. You have heard us talk about the addition or the infusion of more than 1,000 new mental health professionals in the last 4 years, and we will talk more about that as we go through today's presentation. But this doesn't get done just by talking about it. A lot has to be done by those at the local level, and that's why we have our friends here from West Shore ISD. We've also been at this table and talked about the comprehensive school mental health system. This is a system by which we can help families and students identify needs and get them the resources needed so that they can be fantastic students. This system has 8 components. We will talk about each of those 8 components in depth as we go through today's presentation.
Thank you, Diane. As Diane mentioned, the 8 core features of comprehensive school mental health system, they're the focus of the Department of Education when it comes to providing those comprehensive services. When we're looking at how intermediate school districts, local districts are utilizing 31AA, 31N funds, and other mental health supports. Again, think of those as the guideposts or the guardrails, if you will. First one I want to talk about is equipping school staff to support the needs of students. So what we're talking about here is having well-trained educators and instructional support personnel. One of the things that we do at the department is we offer bi-monthly community of practice trainings for school-based behavioral health service providers, as well as school-based behavioral health coordinators. We come together virtually once a month. We have anywhere from 150 to over 200 sometimes providers that attend these meetings along with the coordinators once every other month. And then the other month, the agenda is actually specifically focused to those coordinators. That usually 56 intermediate school districts, we usually average somewhere between 35 and 45 attendees on those. We also have an social emotional learning children's mental health network that meets once a month, and technical assistance and support throughout from the Department of Education and from the Department of Health and Human Services through our mental health and Medicaid consultants. Next piece I want to talk about, continuing that support staff meeting the needs of students. We have multiple trainings that are available throughout the state of Michigan through the Department of Education, through the Department of Health and Human Services. One of those includes the behavioral threat assessment and management training that was sponsored by the Michigan State Police Office of School Safety. There was a tremendous amount of funding in the previous fiscal year's budget. Several educators from across the state were trained on what we refer to as BTAM, again, behavioral threat assessment management training. We also offer at no charge youth mental health first aid training, Handle with Care, and then there's other resources as well, including Michigan Cares, which is a free online mental health wellness courses, Living Work Start. Again, these are free online suicide prevention courses. There's also, as many of you are aware, through Section 31P funding, a significant amount of funding from fiscal year 22 for TRAILS, which is evidence-based mental health programming in schools that supports all 3 tiers, 1, 2, and 3. And again, that's 31P funds. So the next thing talking about is how do we coordinate these resources and strategies? And again, we're doing that through this comprehensive school mental health system. One of the key pieces is how are we using these funds in a sustainable, comprehensive manner? It's one thing to bring in extra helping professionals that are providing supports to students, but how are we doing that in such a way that, again, is comprehensive and sustainable so that we're not just bringing in helping professionals, but then if funding changes, those professionals that have had an impact and started influencing school culture, making students feel safer and more comfortable in schools, making staff excited to come to work again, turn around and having to lay those individuals off because of budget cuts. So one of our focuses has been, again, how do we coordinate resources and strategies to make sure that we're not 100% reliant on a budget that could change from year to year? We just heard from Diane and Spencer about the fluctuation in budget. So we're looking at, again, how do we coordinate resources? One of the things that we're really extremely proud through this coordination of resources and strategies, you can see here, it led to Michigan leading the nation in recovering from pandemic-related absences, pandemic-related increases in chronic school absences. So we led the nation in a drop of 7.7 percentage points during the 22-23 school year. And again, that's just one example of how the Department of Education, Department of Elementary Services, our community partners, et cetera, are all working together to coordinate resources. So to be recognized on a national level, I think is very significant. We also have a project with the Michigan Health Information Network that we're working on. What that is intended to do is provide those providers that have an active care relationship with a student and have the appropriate permissions to have access to other health data that may not be available to them through the school records. Next, I want to look at a comprehensive view in resources and services. Here, particularly what we're talking about is what is the different needs assessments, what is the comprehensive needs assessment is where I want to go with this. So again, what are the existing resources that are currently in place, identifying the needs, figuring out what data we have to, again, look at where we're currently at and where we want to go. So some of the examples of data that's available to us, there's something called the School Health Assessment and Performance Evaluation System, or SHAPE. There's multiple variations. We can take that at the state level, which we did. Local districts can take that. Intermediate school districts can take that. Local buildings, et cetera. So it breaks down, again, not only at the high level at the state, so that we can look at things like, again, where is our funding going? What types of supports are we offering through consultation, through technical assistance and support? But then again, goes down to that granular level actually at the school district, right? So they can do their needs assessment and they can partner with their community mental health agencies or their child mental health centers, et cetera. We also have a partnership with the Region 8 Comprehensive Center. You've probably heard previous presentations about the partnership that we have with them. They support Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana by providing capacity building services to state education agencies to improve educational outcomes. So they did a feasibility study of a comprehensive school mental health system. What's already in existence in Michigan schools? What's going well? What are the challenges? Where do we need to improve? And they also did a national scan of what other states are doing around comprehensive school mental health systems. Next, I want to talk about a multi-tiered system of support. And what we mean by that is efficient, effective, and equitable allocation of resources. So as most of you know, if you've heard about the multi-tiered system of support before, The approach is to ensure that all students, whether they're special education, general education, have access to the full array of services. So again, we're not just only looking at one specific population. All students have access to the full supports of safe, supportive school culture and climate initiatives. And again, that's across all three tiers of support. So tier one being those universal activities, tier two, earlier intervention services and supports, all the way up to that tier three level, which is that more targeted, individualized treatment of services and supports. Moving to building capacity. This is again one of those three pillars that Dr. Glazinski mentioned from the U.S. Department of U.S. Department of Education. They talked about the building capacity. So what we're doing to build capacity at the Department of Education, we're addressing those interconnected academic, social, emotional, behavioral needs of all students. Again, we know that students that are healthy, excited about coming to school, they feel safe, they want to come to school. If they want to come to school, they're more likely to learn, they're more likely to be engaged, they're more likely to see the successes that we want them to have. Again, an array of supports and services that promote that positive school culture and school climate. But then the key piece here too is creating healthier workforces. We have heard over and over again, it wasn't just from the pandemic, educators are feeling burnt out, they're feeling stressed out, they're feeling overwhelmed. So what can we do to not only focus on how we create an environment where students feel safe and happy and come to school, but their educators and the adults that are with them every day as well. Expanding school-based services to connect students and families to the right care by increasing accessibility and reducing barriers. Dr. Glazinski talked about that. Again, that's a key piece. We know that not all students have access to transportation, either from their own family members or public transportation. It's great to say, hey, here's a referral to a community mental health agency or a hospital. But if that's 10 miles down the road that child and that family don't have access to, and we can eliminate that barrier and we can get that child the care they need in school, then they're going to be more successful. And then again, that multi-tiered system support and service delivery that I mentioned. And then next piece is that early identification of student strengths and challenges. So again, this is looking at everything from just a simple check-in in the morning, right? And there's different ways that this can be done. You know, different classroom teachers at the secondary level, for example, can do a daily check-in with a student's device. There's other things such as universal screening that can take place. But how are we identifying students early to find out what types of supports they need so that they can be successful? And then we do have a guidance document that's out there called Choosing and Using Screeners and Assessment. Again, that was another project that with our partners from Region 8 Comprehensive Center that I mentioned previously.
Thank you, Scott. Moving on to evidence-based practices. In the state of Michigan, we have a platform called BH Works. BH Works helps to connect students to services and helps to streamline the process for parental consent and getting those behavioral health services to the kids. It is linking school safety and student well-being under the umbrella of our comprehensive school mental health system. BH Works is a software platform that standardizes referral, screening and assessments, safety planning, care management, and coordination. It can also help an ISD with billing for Medicaid and reporting in dashboards. So looking at where we have BH Works, this is as of July 2024. We are working at getting all ISDs and counties online. As you can see, we are in process with one county. And then this is our progress of implementing BH Works since we started in September of 2021. The impact examples from the use of this particular platform include community of practice, where providers are able to follow consistent best practices and processes, electronic consent forms so that they're not lost in backpacks or lunch boxes or covered in chocolate milk at some point. Students can be provided services anytime, anywhere through telehealth, so when it's needed, it can be provided. The data reports are all real time for our professionals in the field. They can use that to make data-driven decisions. It's a common platform, so as students are mobile, those providers are able to have access to the students' needs and services that have been provided. And it really significantly reduces the amount of time providers need in terms of recording their sessions and notes and things in a secure platform, so they don't have as much burden on them. We know that over 20,000 students have received direct school-based services. These are data directly from BH Works and those counties that are currently participating. Over 1,250 schools are set up to have referrals. We have 920 current users and 460 are direct service providers. But more important, over 32,000 students have had a referral to help them get those needed services. And over 27,000 unduplicated students have been entered into the system for monitoring of their needs.
So we've got this platform, again, that's available to all providers across the state. We know that there is a shortage of providers, not just in Michigan, but across the country in general. One of the unintended consequences of all the state school aid funding to bring in these helping professionals, unfortunately, was we took them from community mental health agencies, child mental health centers, right? So it's not a secret. So we know that we need to grow the profession, not just for school-based providers, but again, across the aisle. So we work with community mental health agency, we work with other partners. So things that we're doing to grow the profession. Again, while other states were relying primarily on those outgoing pandemic relief funds, Michigan was a leader. We added school-based behavioral health providers with recurring state funds. Those 31N funds have been so critical. We talked about over 1,000 helping professionals. We'll get to more in that in just a second. But in addition to that funding, we also made sure that we said if the providers have the correct credentials, that they are to bill Medicaid. So now we're looking again at a sustainable funding source, so that it's we're not 100% reliant each year on the state budget. When schools bill Medicaid for those services, they get reimbursement, and again, they're able to look at a more sustainable funding model. We are working on a lot of innovative solutions for workforce development and to grow talent pipeline solutions. Again, we've got several partners that include the Department of Health and Human Services, our Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, several universities and colleges, professional associations, and even other partners like the Michigan Health Council and Community Mental Health Association of Michigan have all come together on this. Some of those initiatives include this year in the fiscal year 25, there's a grant for an ISD or a local district to develop a community health worker certification program. We're really excited about this. So just like a student can go to a career center right now and get a certification in culinary arts or emergency medical response, we are going to develop a program where now a junior or a senior can attend their career center and come out with a community health worker certification credential and start immediately working out of high school. And that's a direct pipeline if they choose. They want to go on to become a Bachelor of Social Work or a licensed professional counselor, et cetera. So we're really excited about that opportunity. We also have several grants that we've applied and been successful for. One of them includes the My Coach, or the Michigan Career Opportunity Academies for Community Health. It's a federal grant that very similar to what I talked about with a community health worker. It's a grant right now for multiple ISDs to send students, not while they're in high school, but high school graduates can attend a program to earn their community health worker certification program. We also have MyELSIS, or the Michigan Earn, Learn, and Serve in Schools. This is another U.S. Department of Education grant that we received to pay stipends for individuals that are going into these helping professional fields. So many graduate students are paying to go to college to do an internship. It's a significant amount of money. Now they can apply for a stipend and get paid. Instead of just paying all the money out to the university, they're also getting some money back while they're doing that internship. Department of Health and Human Services, through their My Kids Now initiative, has both a loan repayment program as well as a paid internship program. We also have, from fiscal year 24, funding for the SMART bill, or Section 31FF, which again provides stipends to individuals in school social work, school counselor, or school psychology internships. Again, we're focusing on sustainability, and we're doing that by building out a comprehensive school mental health system. We're working on a guidance document currently right now with our partners that I mentioned before about the Region 8 Comprehensive Center to assist in a creation for districts around the state, again, to build out that comprehensive school-based mental health system that aligns with state and federal policies in a fiscally responsible manner. And our friends from West Shore are going to talk about some of the things that they're doing as a result of this guidance. Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services is also providing training and technical assistance on Medicaid School Services Program billing. Again, I mentioned that's a key piece of our funding. When they're billing for Medicaid, they're able to get those funds back and sustain their programs and sustain their individuals if the budgets happen to change. Additional resources are still needed. We know that we need to create a more robust data collection system that allows for data sharing across systems so that we can start to understand the impact on students and monitor progress for continuous improvement. Again, it's one thing to know that over 30,000 students have been helped as a result of this funding, but what does that mean, right? Are we seeing an increase in their attendance? Are we seeing an increase in their excitement and enthusiasm for coming to school? That's where we want to go to that next level. When it comes to some of the data that's available and assessing the impact of services and supports, we have data that's available to us from the Michigan Profile for Healthy Youth, or the MyFi. We also have data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. As a result of those 31N funds, there is a requirement each year to submit a legislative report. You have access to each of those reports from the previous fiscal years, including the first year from 19 all the way up to last year. Fiscal year 24 will not be available until most likely after October 1st, because we're still collecting that data from the last school year. Next, I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a summary of, again, some of the data that's available. This first talks about, these are services delivered by those 31N funded providers that are using the BHWorks platform. So again, this is specific, not all 31N6 funded providers, but those specifically that use the BHWorks platform. Diane showed you, we have 41 ISDs that are using it. As you can see here, nearly 90,000 students. And of course, it's so tiny. Individual therapy, sorry about that, thank you. Almost 90,000 students collectively had an individual therapy session within school. Again, next talks about the forum activity. These are the forums that are available within BHWorks. So users can, again, they can create plans of care, the parent and guardian consent. They can do an electronic consent form, or they can send paper pencil, upload it to the document. But you can see, again, by far the most commonly used forms are those plans of care at nearly 9,000 students. But there's a tremendous amount of forms that are available. Diane talked about, again, it's intended to create efficiencies, streamline best practices, so that ultimately our providers are doing what they're intended to do, which is work with students, not tracking down consent forms or other things like that. Here's an example of the referrals over the past 2 years. Again, this is exclusively for our BHWorks users. You can see in August, for example, the first year, 245 as opposed to last year, 999. As we get more users that are using the platform, obviously that data is going to go up. But you can clearly see from 22-23 to 23-24 the increase in students that are getting access to services, which is great. This is the number of students served by a 31N funded provider. So this is overall. This is now we're no longer looking at just BHWorks users, but any provider that was hired or contracted through 31N6 funding. You can see that first year of funding, we had just under 7,500 students, as opposed to in 22-23, nearly 30,000. And then the number of providers, again, looking at that first year, we had under 170 providers. Last year, we had nearly 500. And this is just from 31N funding. So before I pass it back to Diane, again, as you can see, we know that adding providers is a priority. In the last 4 years, because of the amazing support, funding for children's mental health and the state school aid, it's resulted in over 1,000 helping professionals either being hired or contracted to work directly with students in schools.
Thanks, Scott. So back to funding and the fiscal year 25 funding. As we talked about before, the state school aid section 31N are recurring funds. Those were the first set of funds ever received in the state aid budget in fiscal year 2019. Those continue, and they have a 20% match requirement. We have the Caring for Students Medicaid reimbursement, which we were one of the first states to ever seek that particular type of Medicaid reimbursement for this work. And then we have the state school aid section 31AA recurring funds. Remember, 31AA in the last two budgets, it was the only time 31AA first came about 2 years ago. It was a large amount of money, but it was non-recurring. It was, as Dr. Rice talked about, not structural. Districts should not have been planning recurring expenditures according to non-recurring funding. So while we're not thrilled with the cut, we are happy that those funds that are there are now set up to be recurring. And what we hope to see is an increase in those recurring funding for both mental health and safety in section 31AA. This is what it looks like in FY25, 31N, 31AA, as well as section 99, subsection 17, has a $500,000 line item for implementation of the My Student Voice Perception Survey. This is a survey where students tell us how they feel accepted or welcomed or a part of their school climate. This is what the funding looks like since FY18. Again, as we talk about every time we're at the table, there was $0 in FY18 in this work. And now we're up to over $135 million. And that is great for the work that we're trying to do to support kids. In addition, in the budget, as we talked about before, Section 604 was money for that school-based mental health services and Medicaid billing training, money for the Medicaid school services program training to providers and administrators to try to maximize that Medicaid services reimbursement, and also money for creating that community health worker certification program. So in closing, for Scott and I, we just want to read to you the Sharon Hoover quote that says, "Comprehensive school mental health systems provide an array of supports and services to promote positive school climate, social and emotional learning, and mental health and well-being, while reducing the prevalence and severity of mental illness." So with that, Scott and I thank you, and we would like to welcome our colleagues and friends from West Shore ISD, or ESD.
Yes, that's right. Thank you for inviting us in today, and we really appreciate this opportunity to tell you about West Shore ESD's journey toward building a comprehensive school mental health system. So a little bit about us. I'm Amy Taranko, and I'm beginning my 6th year as the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services at the ESD. Prior to that, I was an elementary principal for 10 years and a classroom teacher in both elementary and middle schools for the 16 years prior to that. It is my great honor to supervise the 31N funded general education social workers and mental health providers in our ESD.
And good morning, my name is Monique Salimos. I am one of those 31N funded mental health providers at West Shore ESD, and I have been with the program since its inception back in 2019. In my role, I have worked with kiddos and families and teachers ranging from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade in various districts across our region. Prior to coming to West Shore ESD, I worked in adolescent health.
So just a little bit about West Shore ESD. You can see our enrollment is we have just over 7,000 K-12 students enrolled. We service 9 local districts in our 3-county area, our largest being Leadington Area School District and our smallest Gateway to Success Academy. When looking at our subgroup data, you can see our economically disadvantaged average is at 67%, and this represents a range in our economically disadvantaged population from our lowest district, which has a percentage of 51%, to our highest economically disadvantaged percentage, which is 98%. So that's the average of those. You can also see we have a significant percentage of Hispanic students in our region, and this is in part due to the agricultural industry and the migrant history that exists in our area.
So earlier you heard from our state colleagues about the state level initiatives to support the core features of a comprehensive school mental health system. As we speak with you today, we would like to share what this can look like at the local level. We hope our story illustrates how one ESD is driving this work forward to strengthen school-based mental health systems in our region.
And so we would like to illustrate today our ESD's journey to integrate and strengthen these components of a comprehensive school mental health system through 3 stories. To protect student confidentiality, these stories are all hypothetical, but they are based on actual student situations and circumstances that are common in all of our local districts. It's important to note that while the interventions we mention in these stories are available and often utilized in our local schools, there is differentiation in each of our local districts. One size does not fit all. It is important that our schools have the flexibility to meet the unique needs of their students and their communities.
Okay, so our first student is a 6-year-old. He was born in a household with parents who struggle with addiction. Because of this, they are frequently in and out of jail and have had difficulty maintaining consistent employment. The student is often left with his grandma, who has limited resources. He arrives to school for the first time in 1st grade, having not attended preschool or kindergarten. From day 1, he runs out of the classroom multiple times a day, often fleeing the building. He frequently growls and screams in class, disrupting the classroom learning environment. At times, he is threatening to other students and throws chairs, desks, and books. PE class is one of the few instances where the student is able to participate successfully. The student's teacher tries her best to manage the student's behavior, but feels like the tools at her disposal aren't working. At his school, there is only one school counselor who is responsible for supporting the 550 students enrolled. As a result of these challenges, the student spends much of his day with the school principal. The student's teacher, counselor, and administrator are frustrated and at a loss on how to best support the student. In the past, the student would frequently be removed from the classroom and at times suspended. The school would attempt to establish care for him with outside mental health providers. However, this support would be dependent on provider availability. Due to family instability and limited resources, transportation to services would rarely, if ever, occur. The efforts to support the student would take significant time of several school staff members. Once significant academic and behavioral data has been collected, which is dependent on sufficient school attendance, the student would likely be recommended for a special education evaluation, a process that takes time. If he qualifies, he would receive services to begin addressing his academic and behavioral needs. Today, from the moment this student enters the classroom, he would be supported by a teacher trained in trauma-informed practices who emphasizes relationship, safety, and routines. Knowing food insecurity is an issue at home, the teacher ensures that this student has food and water always available to him. She helps the student believe that when he is at school, he will be cared for and his needs will be met. On a daily basis, the teacher implements an evidence-based Tier 1 social-emotional learning curriculum. This provides a student with consistent opportunities to build relationships with his peers and practice skills that are key to learning, including, especially at our 1st grade level, listening, turn-taking, and self-management. Data is consistently collected to assess the student's social, emotional, and behavioral needs. Based on this data, school staff implement an evidence-based Tier 2 intervention called Check-In, Check-Out, in which the student begins and ends his day by connecting with his favorite adult, the PE teacher, to set goals and reflect on his progress. The student also qualifies to meet with a 31N funded general education social worker who uses BH Works to quickly obtain parental consent and develop a personalized plan of care in partnership with the student, his grandma, and the student's teacher. The student and social worker meet weekly for school-based behavioral health sessions. Over time and with consistent support, the student begins to spend more time in the classroom, engage with his classmates, and participate in learning. He begins to recognize that school is a safe place where he can learn. These robust tiered interventions result in significant behavioral improvement for the student and reductions in severe disruptions to his class. You can see on the screen, maybe if you press one more button, I think it appears, yep, the components of the comprehensive school mental health system that contribute to the improved outcomes for the student.
Our next student is in 7th grade. Her mom died of a suspected drug overdose 1 year ago, and she has never known her father. She now lives with her aunt. Since her mom's death, her school attendance has been inconsistent, and when she does attend, she is withdrawn and rarely speaks in class. She rotates through 6 classes each day and has begun to struggle academically. Her friendships have diminished, and her teachers are aware of her circumstances and extend kindness to her, but they really don't know what else to do to support her. One day, she discloses thoughts of suicide in a writing assignment. In the past, the teacher would probably send the student to the school counselor, who would call the student's aunt. The counselor would provide the aunt with a list of local mental health resources, and then the counselor would try to squeeze in the student for some somewhat regular meetings to check in on her. However, today, that teacher works in a school where all staff have been trained in a school-based suicide prevention process. The teacher knows to immediately refer the student to the school-based mental health provider, who uses an evidence-based suicide screener. Based on those results, the provider follows the procedure identified in our regional school suicide risk flowchart and completes the appropriate steps, including developing a safety plan with the student and the aunt. BH Works is utilized to quickly obtain guardian consent from the student's aunt, and the student is subsequently screened for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Due to the collaborative efforts between the school and community service providers, which is facilitated through our interconnected systems framework in our area, the aunt only needs to sign one release of information form, which is then shared with the appropriate service providers. This expedites the process for mental health screening results to be shared with the student's primary care provider, who is then also able to coordinate care with the mental health provider. Evidence-based mental health treatment is provided on a weekly basis in the school setting through the 31N funded provider. The student is referred to the school counselor's friendship lunch program, in which the student has lunch in a quieter space with the counselor and a few classmates. Informed by a regional attendance initiative in our area, the school closely monitors the student's attendance, and multi-tiered attendance interventions have been implemented. Over time, the student's suicide ideation decreases, and she begins to attend school regularly. She re-engages academically and socially. As with our first student, several features of a comprehensive school mental health system are utilized to help this struggling student.
Our final student is in 10th grade and barely passing his classes. He lives at home with his mom and dad. He does not participate in any extracurriculars, hangs out with a few friends, and is not really a behavioral concern in the school. Another student reported to the school counselor that she saw a violent social media post from the student that she found disturbing. In the past, the school counselor would meet with a student, and that student might say, "I didn't mean it." The counselor would call the parent to report the conversation and concern. The parent's response might lead the counselor to believe that they would take care of it. Today, the counselor works in a school where he is trained in the evidence-based behavioral threat assessment and management, or BTAM process. He immediately convenes the school's BTAM core team, who in this case quickly identify that the student poses a possible threat to the school community. This triggers the decision that a full BTAM protocol needs to be conducted. Participants in this process include, at minimum, the school administrator, school resource officer, additional law enforcement partners, teachers, a school counselor, and a mental health provider. An intervention and monitoring plan is established in which the student participates in daily safety searches at school and is connected to an after-school program that aligns with his interests. The student's family agrees to participate in Prevent to Protect in cooperation with Michigan State University. Prevent to Protect is an adolescent targeted violence prevention project aimed at helping students, families, and schools with focused mentorship and case management of students who are at the highest risk of targeted violence towards schools. Through Prevent to Protect, the student receives thorough mental health screening and evaluation and is connected to a mentor. Barriers are removed to ensure the student engages with the local community mental health system, where he receives intensive, evidence-based mental health services and psychiatric treatment. Over time, the student's engagement in school increases, and through ongoing mentoring or monitoring, no further threats of violence toward himself or others are indicated. Finally, you can see again on the screen the components of a comprehensive school mental health system that contribute to the improved outcomes for the student and his school community.
So as demonstrated in these three scenarios, there has been a huge improvement in the capacity of the local school districts and our ESD to meet the complex and diverse needs of students. In terms of our knowledge, experience, and the supports in place, we are now better equipped to address these needs in ways that are tailored to our individual school districts. Though far from perfect, our systems are light years ahead of where we were just a few years ago. Increased funding for school mental health and safety have ensured more qualified professionals and systems are in place at our ESD and in our local districts. Many of these services ensure that students' needs are being met in school where they are more likely to access them. The ESD has prioritized building systems between schools and community partners to support critical initiatives like BTAM, suicide prevention, trauma-informed practices, and tackling attendance challenges. At the end of the day, we are better equipped as schools and communities to address the behavioral and mental health needs of students to ensure they can experience academic success. However, while progress has been made, challenges still remain. In our region, the mental health provider to student ratio is far below what is recommended. This means that many students still go without adequate access to mental health care. Providing school-based services is always a balancing act to ensure the impact on the student's academic instructional time is minimal. And finally, the issues faced by students, families, schools, and communities are complex and dynamic. As educators, we know we must remain diligent and committed to this important work. So some of the specific data points we'd like to reference and highlight demonstrates the growth of our 31N program since its inception in 2019, going back to some of the data that Scott shared. As you can see on our screen, we now have 7 mental health providers in our region that provide therapy to over 250 students in our region on an annual basis. This is over 250 students that would otherwise go without the needed mental health treatment. So we are very appreciative of that funding and the difference it has made in our community.
And some of our most important data comes from the people we serve. For our 31N program, we annually collect feedback from students, parents, and school staff to understand the impact of our services and make continuous improvements. I will now share a few quotes we received at the end of the most recent school year, and you can read these along with me on the screen or in your packets. So a parent shared, "I like the fact that her therapist took time to listen to my daughter about her feelings, emotions, and how he went about having her write in a journal to help her channel her anger. She has been a totally different child this year. I am so proud of the young lady she has become." A school staff member shared, "The general education social worker is able to provide reliable weekly counseling support to some of our most vulnerable students. She forms relationships exceptionally well with students. Her knowledge of trauma and EMDR has made a real positive impact with students and families, and the result is seen in students able to return to class and engage more fully in their academic pursuits." And finally, from a student, "I got to let some things off my chest without feeling judged. I wasn't expecting to feel this way. I've also learned to not keep everything in and bottled up before I explode." We are all working toward a common goal of ensuring our schools are places where students can be healthy and safe. We know this lays the groundwork for all students to be fully engaged in learning so that they can achieve at the highest level of academic success.
So we thank you again for this opportunity to share our story today. We also would like to thank the state of Michigan and the Michigan Department of Education for providing funding and technical assistance in this work and giving us the flexibility to meet the needs of students in our region in ways that we determine. We also want to give thanks to all of our ESD and local colleagues and educators in our region and across the state that are doing this hard and important work every single day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Presenters, board members, questions or comments at 12:11. Mr. McMillan.
I apologize. I do have a few, and I think they're extremely important. So I don't care if I only get 10 minutes or a half hour for lunch. I know some people, I know a half hour is what a lot of people get. So I want to talk, and I appreciate the presentation. I like the scenarios, but I'd like to understand, I honestly don't know legally. So when we're talking legally, do parents have a say over like which school employee provides the mental health services? I know parents who have gone to 2, 3, 4 counselors for their student or their child, and they can't find the right one, or it takes them quite a while. What do they have a say over which employee, if they have more than one mental health?
Yeah, I mean, in a fortunate scenario, there is more than one. In some of our districts, there isn't.
Okay.
But the parent always, or guardian always gets to decide if that child receives treatment at school or not. So these services are never required of a student in our region. It's a conversation with that parent or guardian, the student's teacher, the student, and then they decide if that's an appropriate fit. Sometimes it's not, and so a referral to an outside provider is made, or if there is another provider in that district.
Now, if a parent did say, yes, give consent, but the student says, I feel suicidal, but please don't tell my parents for whatever reason, who, let's say the student is 17. I'd also like to say if the student was 10, but let's say 17 or 10, do they have to tell the parents still or no? Okay, okay.
Mandated reporters.
Okay, good. And then as far as
Can you explain that so that people can understand it better?
Yeah, so every time I meet with a student for the first time, I make sure that they understand the limits to confidentiality within a therapy session, which means that if they're ever expressing thoughts of harming themselves or someone else, or if they're telling me that someone is harming them, I am legally required to bring in other safe adults to help address that situation.
Okay.
So that could be in some situations a referral to CPS if it were that they were being harmed by an adult, or if they're having suicidal thoughts, then we're engaging their parents and accessing appropriate treatment.
Okay, but what if it's something that's not regarding harm, but just something that they said, I'd rather my parents not know this? Is that something that would be required to tell the parents?
So similar to any sort of healthcare professional, that's protected within confidentiality.
Okay, so whoever is making the call whether this could hurt the child or not is the provider and not the parents. So, the parents may think this is harmful. If the provider says, no, it's not, then they don't have to tell the parents.
So we follow the mandated reporter language within state law.
Okay, and then let's see, what about billing? So Medicaid billing, how much does Medicaid pay for like a 30-minute session or something like that?
So Michigan's unique in that we don't do a fee for service. We do what's called the random moment time study. And basically what it is the state contracts with, it's called the Public Consulting Group, or PCG. And any certified provider that has the proper credentials is placed on what's called a staff pool list. And just like jury duty, you could be randomly selected for a random moment in time study. You could be selected for jury duty in your local county. So all providers that have the credentials are placed on the staff pool list, and they can receive an email that says, on August 13th at 11:59 p.m., what were you doing? And it's basically to get a sample of what these individuals are doing with their time. So if you're providing a direct service, if you're attending an IEP meeting, if you're developing a plan of care, but those would all be, considered appropriate behaviors that would be Medicaid reimbursable. But you might be traveling to an appointment. You may be on lunch. So again, it's literally a random moment in time and study. And what it does is it takes the percentage of time that our school-based providers are working with students, and then there's a whole formula that is determined what reimbursement comes back to. So it's our intermediate school districts that have what's called an NPI, or a National Provider Identifier. Just like, if we go to a primary care physician, they have an NPI, right? Well, in Michigan, again, our intermediate school districts have one NPI. So all providers in Wayne-Risa are under the same NPI. All providers in Jackson County ISD, West Shore ESD. Okay. So it's not Monique's individual NPI. It's her employer.
Okay.
And then this collective study determines how much reimbursement on average comes back to each intermediate school district.
I mean, so would you say there's an incentive to find reasons to bill Medicaid or not? Is there any incentive by the district or the provider to say, you know, the more I find reasons to bill Medicaid, the more we're going to get reimbursed for it?
No, because again, it's going to work itself out throughout the random moment time study, all employees across the state of Michigan.
The 29,758 students that were served in that slide 27, so all of those required a parent or guardian approval. Is that right? For all 27,000? No services were provided unless there was parental approval for those students?
Not necessarily. The state of Michigan Mental Health Code allows for a student 14 or older to consent to their own services.
For a limited amount of time. For a limited amount.
They can consent, but, okay, so they could be having services and the parents don't know.
Yes. For a limited
Legally
amount of
correct.
time.
Yep, for a limited amount of time, which is 12 sessions or 4 months per request.
But if there's any harm involved, they would tell them.
That's exactly right. So not only does the mental health code have that disclosure that if there's a compelling need, they must report, it also specifically states that the services cannot undermine the relationship with the parents. Very specific in the mental health code that it promotes the minor's relationship to the parent or guardian and shall not undermine the values of the parent, guardian, or person. That's all.
I mean, even if the parent and guardian are not, you know, some of those instances, they didn't seem like they, you know, they might be more difficult. I mean, some of the reasons, some people say, well, the parents, you know, may not have the best interest in the, you know, in the child, you know, and the state does or the school does. I mean, is that, they would still say whatever the parent says goes?
I guess I don't understand your question.
All right, never mind. And then I think finally, what if the provider decides that the best, and I've seen this in students, the best course of action because of bullying or anxiety over the curriculum and the speed and the pressure, that the best thing is to homeschool the kid, get them out of the district, get them out of the school and homeschool them. Is that something that a provider could decide to recommend to the parents?
So as a mental health provider, I am not making recommendations about what's best for the child. That's if the parent is deciding and the student's deciding that's what's best, then we're not standing in the way of that, if that's what your question is.
Wait, you're not providing advice as far as how to help the student?
In terms of if they should be homeschooled or staying in the school system.
Well, no, but I'm saying, what if they exhibit a ton of anxiety and bullying, and they are, you know, that's why they're suicidal thoughts, whatever. Yeah. You wouldn't say, you know, it might be best for the student to get out of this situation.
We would be utilizing evidence-based mental health treatment based on the needs of the student to drive any sort of treatment. And then often that's up to the parent's decision to.
I mean, I know the district would lose money if they did that, so maybe that would be a reason not to as well, but I just you know, I would think that they could determine that this would, yeah. I feel this is best and I should share that, but maybe the incentives are wrong.
I'd like to say that has never come up in my 5 years of working with a student.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Tilley.
I love this for multiple reasons. From the streamlining of it, which makes it much easier. I've had parents contact me about needing help, needing to find a counselor, and reaching out to agencies and maybe not getting help as fast as they need to get the help. And I've even, you know, gone on the website and looked at the agency to look at which board members I know so that I can contact them and try to help speed it up for the parents. I think this is great to have this streamlined. I appreciate the department getting as many districts involved as possible because I see where, you know, we've grown from 2021 with the usage. And I appreciate too, in addition to the mental health piece, because this is a part of it, although everyone doesn't think about it in that way, the protective factors. So in the example that you guys used, one of the things that worked was having the protective factor, the programming. So sometimes our students need to be a part of after-school programs or different programs, which helps as well. When my daughter was in I think middle school, she faced bullying, and it was a huge issue in Southfield Public Schools. So she worked with her teachers to actually implement programming herself so that she can have a peer-to-peer type of group with students. I think that's good too, to have that peer-led group as a protective factor, which a lot of people don't think of. So that's just another aspect of something that can be implemented, types of programming where helping the students lead those programs. So, but I wanted to know, with the districts that have not come on board yet, do we know why they haven't come on board? And because everybody has different reasons. And how are we looking with getting them on board?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of them already have an existing platform, so that it's not a need for them, right? They have a system that's in place for referrals, plans of care, et cetera. So that's going to take care of some. Others, a part of it, Diane talked about one of the integration pieces, Medicaid billing. Unfortunately, we have 3 different Medicaid billing vendors in our school services. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. It creates a conflict, right? If the more you have, the more integration you need. We've had one particular vendor that has been a little bit more reluctant to integrate with BHWorks. So those clients that have that particular Medicaid vendor are the primarily ones that are not using it yet, because again, they want one solution. And unfortunately, until we get that full integration, what would happen is they'd have to use BHWorks for things like the plan of care, for the consent, but then they would turn around and have to use that other platform for the billing. And so a lot of them don't want to use 2 different platforms, which is, again, the whole purpose is efficiency, getting providers to work with students, not have to worry about logging into this system and then turning around and logging into that one. We're getting closer to that integration. That Medicaid vendor is getting closer. We're still not there yet, but I think that will easily bring in, of the 15 that are out, a good 5, possibly even up to 10 more. Again, there's going to be some that will always say no thank you because they already have their needs met.
And lastly, how are we working with parents to make sure that they know that this is a possibility, that they can have access to this for their child? Because I definitely see a huge need in our urban and rural areas where there's less access. So how do we communicate to make sure that they know?
Would you address that locally?
Yeah, I mean, just from our perspective, so this is going to look different across the state. We work with our local districts to figure out the best way to communicate with parents. So in some districts, there's multiple mental health providers through different funding streams. And so we're communicating an array of services. That could be through communications that parents send out to teachers or through parent-teacher conferences. Oftentimes our referrals, especially for our younger children, are coming through from teachers themselves who are noticing some difficulties or challenges, and then we're reaching out to the parents directly to explain the scope of services and gauge their interest at that point. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Tilley. Ms. Snyder?
So there's 29,000 students, it sounded like, that were helped last year, is that right? It was just in the last year?
Yes.
What was the number? Okay. Were you guys able to get then funding through who is it that you go through? You said you have NPIs with ISDs?
So the intermediate school districts have their own NPIs that they bill Medicaid.
Okay, and so those 29,000 plus students were funded through Medicaid?
No, not necessarily. So of those 29,000 students, if any of them happened to be Medicaid eligible and a service was performed that was Medicaid reimbursable, then again, those services could be billed. But with 31N funding, it's not exclusively to Medicaid eligible students. All students across the state of Michigan are eligible for these services. Okay. If they happen to be Medicaid eligible, and if a plan of care is, so Medicaid has requirements, just like any other billing. But again, if the student meets the criteria of being Medicaid eligible, the provider has created a plan of care, they have the proper consents in place, all of that, then that triggers the next step, which would be the Medicaid billing.
Which is a network of providers, like you said, that get called in a moment in time study. Do we have, of the 29,000 students, a breakdown of how many of those students were provided for through that network and through the NPI and that billing? And how many students weren't eligible for that, but we still served anyway? Can we break down the 29,000 students in how they received access and how they were paid for?
I do not believe we can go down to that granular of a level.
Okay, I think we need to.
Could I ask a question? So I think there's some misunderstanding. The 29,000 children are children that were served via Section 31N funding.
Correct.
Section 31N funding funds the social workers at the ISDs. So we know who is serving, for the most part, our young people. The question about who's Medicaid eligible and who isn't is a different question. But who's serving our kids, I think, is pretty clear. You're serving our children, and so too your colleagues across the state.
So I'll continue to share what I'm thinking, actually, because ultimately I think we need to have a solid bird's eye view of exactly what dollars are being utilized currently and how they're directly getting to students, right? So when I ask that question, we should have that information. We should be able to get down to a granular concept of exactly how each one of our 29,000 students in the last year have received mental health services through schools, right? Because we can't really assess the problem of mental health without having that data and looking at it and, you know, making a statement about it. So, you know what, let me just pause on my questions and write down further questions, because it especially relates, I would say, even to the resolution we're going to discuss later. So it sounds like there are multiple sources of funding. There are multiple layers to this. And I appreciated the presentation. It's certainly not anything negative about what you guys are doing, and I appreciate it. I just want to make sure I have a full understanding of what students maybe didn't get services, and for the ones who did get services, how were they funded? Because it sounds like there's more than just 31N, there's 31AA, there's Medicare, Medicaid eligible students, and that needs to be looked at from a,
I do want to clarify.
Yeah.
All students are eligible for these services.
Right,
Medicaid,
exactly.
again, is a bonus.
Exactly.
But again, that is not exclusive to so all students in Michigan
Sure.
are eligible for these services as a result of these funds.
But when we define need, we have to have that granular level study on exactly what we're doing and what the gap is and what to do moving forward. Otherwise, we're just talking about the problem that we all agree is a problem. Does that make sense? I think it does. I'm pretty sure. I mean, you have line items, right? You have this concept of there's a need. You define the need. So that's
I can
what
give an example too of how it works.
Be
So
great.
right now, like Dr. Rice said, our providers are all funded through 31N. When we Medicaid bill, we do not get full 100% reimbursement of those funds. It's a percentage. And then we take that, I wish I knew the exact percentage, and put it into our 31N fund to maintain the longevity of hiring our providers.
Right.
So it's kind of like this funding source that helps maintain the longevity. And that's kind of how it works for us, because it never replaces those funds completely.
And all I'm asking is to come up here and see how many students we're serving, where the gap is, exactly what that looks like, and how to move forward, because that's the work of defining the problem that we're talking about right now. So anyhow, I'll put it in writing so it's maybe less confusing.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Dr. Pugh, Ms. Lipton, and Lunch.
So, and I to board member Snyder's point, this is going to be something that we have a conversation about in just post-lunch in our legislative session. And so I paused on questions related to budget, and I will defer my long list of questions, and hopefully you all will be around. Some of you will be around this late afternoon. But a couple of the points that I took away from in your presentation is better doesn't mean adequate. So we see better with the funding that's been provided, but it definitely doesn't see that doesn't mean adequate. Then as the scenarios that were presented, and thank you for those, for bringing those to life, what it looks like in real life. But you presented, I think it was 3 different scenarios, but in many school buildings, those scenarios are not happening in isolation. I mean, they're happening simultaneously at the same time in the same school buildings and on repeat daily. Our children are showing up with these needs, and daily we are seeing inadequate, better, but not adequate response to the needs of our children. And when we see the crises that we've seen in different buildings, we know that we have to do better. And so I will pause with my questions because I will bring those up when we talk about the resolution with the budget cuts at a time when we see better, but nowhere near adequate. And we are seeing the scenarios that you presented on repeat, all happening at the same time in the same school buildings, maybe even in the same classrooms. And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Ms. Lipton, you get the benediction.
Yes, thank you. I just had a really quick question about the CHW certification program. You got a FY25 grant for ISD to develop a community health worker certification program. Is that contemplated to be like a 2-year associate's degree through a community college, or are you contemplating?
No, actually, so a community health
shorter-term
worker certification program, currently right now, a high school graduate can take an accreditation program. It does not require an associate's degree. It's a certain number of hours. What we would like to do is develop a actual career center program. So it's never been done before. That's why this is a brand new grant, and we want to develop it through a career and technical education program at a career center where, again, a junior and senior in high school could earn this credential, graduate from high school, and go earn, a decent $18 to $25 wage, potentially join the pipeline into a social work career, et cetera.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lipton.
One last thing real quick.
You've had quite a few
I'd like
opportunities.
a very important question.
A singular
Yes.
question, please.
Okay. I'm reading from the National Library of Medicine website, 2019 study that says gender dysphoric patients are at a significant risk for psychiatric comorbidities and suicidal ideation attempts. So given what you were talking about as far as if a student is, could harm themselves or harm others, that you need to tell the parent or the guardian, if they exhibit gender dysphoria, they're certainly at higher risk of suicide ideation. Would that mean that you would inform the parents, even if they're 15, 16 years old, and even if the student said, please don't tell my parents?
So thankfully with BH Works, at least in our region, we're able to do suicide risk screening, evidence-based suicide risk screening routinely with our students. And so that's a really great way to be able to determine for any student that's at high risk for suicide ideation. We can use an evidence-based screener to determine if they're at risk, and if they are, then that we follow our mandated reporting process.
So if you feel that suicide or a gender dysphoric student exhibiting that is not suicidal, then you wouldn't, and they don't want it, then you wouldn't tell the parent.
We would go based on the results of a screener, a suicide risk screener. So if they screen as no risk,
So potentially you would not tell the parent.
we would go based on
Just
the
yes or
results
no?
of a suicide risk
Potentially? Can you just say yes or no?
Well, the question's been asked 3 times.
And they're not
It's been
answering
responded
it.
to 3 times. They are responding to
is
it.
it
What
yes
they've
or no?
said is, if there is a concern about harm to self or others, they report to parent.
May I rephrase your question?
What?
May I rephrase your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible to have a gender dysphoric student that does not reach the score on that test for suicidal ideation, and we would withhold that gender dysphoric information from parents?
In my experience in our region, I have not worked with a gender dysphoric client.
But based on the standards that you guys are presenting.
And so we screen students for suicidal ideation.
Oh my
And then
gosh,
based
can't
on the
even give a
results
yes
of
or
the
no.
Dr. Rice, may I?
You know what, I wanted to say this, okay? You have presented for an hour and 10 minutes really, really well, and with tremendous patience and with tremendous professionalism. And we appreciate you. We appreciate you as department staff, but we appreciate you as guests into our space. You've done a terrific job of representing your profession across the state of Michigan, and we appreciate that. Board, it is 12:36. Presentation with Q&A of an hour and 10 minutes is done. We will have lunch, and we will re-pick up at 1:10. Thank you.